Chapter 199. 3. Older men know how to dote on ladies better. With people who were useful to him, he would show them more tolerance, bestowing onto them the greatest authority and glory. For those who were of no use to him, there was only one word for them: death. His contempt for others was so great that he never remembered people's names, where even after knowing Bai Ji Yan, it was only because Bai Ji Yan was always appearing by his side, and it took him a whole year's time before he finally came to remember Bai Ji Yan's name. No one was able to walk into this man's heart, except for one legendary lady in cloud heaven more than 100 years ago. She was not fearful of him, nor did she detest him, never once looking at him with a strange gaze, but only with one that was filled with comforting warmth like sunshine, which silently seeped into that cold hard heart. Ever since then, from being a demon that everyone feared and was shrouded in dark mystery, Lu Junyao slowly began to turn into a normal human being. He learned how to hide the dark and terrifying side of himself before others, and a smile came to always hang from his lips. He became someone no one was able to read or fathom, which made people fear him even more. To him, that lady played both the role of a mother and that of a teacher. And now, another exception has appeared. One that made him go against his own principles, to the extent that he was even willing to disregard his own safety for her sake, and actually sought to take her as his own. Thinking back on it, all of this must have already been destined by fate all along. The next day, the three great sects' friendship meet officially commenced. The Faint Mist sect had expended 2 whole days on the search. Besides the few people who were friendly to Qinyu, anyone who had anything to say about it all thought that she had been nothing but a burden for everyone, and had taken up so much of everyone's time. It was only after the sect leader Wen Renqian who stepped forth to explain it that everyone then came to know what had really caused this to happen. It was then known that the culprits were actually a bunch of fellas from the Soul Cultivators department that stirred up trouble just because of jealousy. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The Faint Mist sect strictly forbids any internal strife among their disciples, and all those Soul Cultivators department disciples who had a part in the mess had punishments meted out to them. Additionally, if they were not able to achieve good results in the sect's next internal ranking competition, they would also be kicked out of the sect altogether, which was considered quite a harsh punishment. Due to her injuries, Qinyu was brought back to the gathered cloud loft to recuperate by Lu Junyao, where she would be escorted directly to the Carefree Valley, while Qin Bei and Mu Lai went back to the Faint Mist sect to gather up with all the other participants. Why haven't we seen our little junior from the Deviant department? I heard that she went into the Forbidden Grounds. Is she alright? Just before they set out, when he did not see Qinyu among the Deviant department's disciples, Tanlin Roa could not help himself but come ask Mu Lai about it. Mu Lai then replied, she sustained injuries and her mobility is still a little restricted for the moment. She will probably not be able to take part in the friendship meet among the sects this time. What she said was indeed the truth. Just before they left, she had gone to visit Qinyu and had seen the young lady lying prone on her bed so pitifully. It was said that her entire back was one grisly wound and she was unable to lie on her back at all. She was not even able to sleep comfortably, not to mention coming down from the bed to walk. Chapter 199. For older men know how to dote on ladies better, that is such a great pity. The little junior girl is so highly skilled that the Faint Mist sect's strength will be significantly reduced without her. Tanlin Roa said rather ruefully. Back when a teacher had asked about it, Mu Lai had said that she was hurt and it was inconvenient for her to move around too much, so she was just resting back in her room. So, no one was even aware of the fact that she was actually not here in the Faint Mist sect at all. After an entire night's rest together with Bai Ji Yan's amazing divine wound healing medicine, Qinyu could feel that her back was already starting to scab, and it was no longer so excruciating painful that she wished she would die with just the slightest movement. Although she was still unable to lie down to sleep, but it was already so much better than before. A couple of soft knocks sounded on the door and a tall figure in a purple robe came walking in. He was holding a set of light purple clothes in his hands as he approached the young lady and said, wear this. Qin Yu was seated on the bed and she looked up at him in slight surprise. I have clothes. I do not need. These clothes are made with silk from the highest grade heavenly silkworms, the softest fabric throughout the lands. It is very comfortable to wear, light and smooth, so that it does not chafe on your wounds. Lu Junyao went on to explain. No matter how good the quality was for other regular fabrics, it would still chafe at her wound with the slightest movement she made, and clothes made with silk from the heavenly silkworm resolves that problem completely. Qin Yu had not thought that he would be so thoughtful, paying attention to such a small detail like clothes. It must be said that it warmed her heart, but why is it purple? As she was so used to wearing white all this time, she was not able to get used to other colors for a moment. Because this was from a purple-colored heavenly silkworm, so the threads it spits would naturally be purple. Purple heavenly silkworms are royalty among their species, the highest grade of heavenly silkworms there is. Qin Yu nodded in understanding. You really know how to splurge, using only the best of everything. Lu Junyao laughed softly. That is only natural. Do you need me to help you wear your clothes? It might be a little hard for you with your injury. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Yu immediately stared at him and then said, My injury is on my back, and not on my hands. In what way does that make it hard to do it? I think you are just using it as an excuse to fulfill your immoral intentions. She was purposely saying that to irritate the man, but against anything she could have expected, the man's eyes flashed with a glint and the smile at the corners of his lips grew deeper. A long slender finger then reached out and tapped her gently on the tip of her nose. You're really becoming more and more intelligent. Qin Yu's cheeks flushed a crimson red and she could not help but to let out an indignant roar, You get yourself out of here right this instant. Damn that man. Always taking liberties with her. In the end, any tiny bit of favorable impression she had of him in her heart from the thoughtful things he did evaporated, thinking that she must have been hallucinating. That scoundrel is just one true black-bellied lecherous bushy-tailed wolf. Chapter 200. 1. This maniac is lusting after his beautiful looks. The Carefree Valley's headquarters sat at the bottom of a sheer and treacherous cliff, one of the places in the Constellation Lands that was famously dangerous. To the Carefree Valley's disciples who had the unmatched abilities in Lightfoot skills, which enabled them to leap and vault over roofs and high walls effortlessly, traversing up and down the sheer cliff face was a task that did not even require them to break a sweat. But to outsiders, trying to scale that wall could easily cause them to lose their lives. Before the cliff's edge, tens of young men stood dressed in uniform dark blue clothes, their faces covered behind demon masks. The Carefree Valley's assassins were categorized into 4 different grades. In descending order, they were Gold Badge Assassins, Heaven Grade Assassins, Mystical Grade Assassins, and the Yellow Grade Assassins. The color of their clothes were also based according to their grading as well. The Gold Badge Assassins all wore scarlet, the Mystical Grade Assassins dark green, and the Yellow Grade Assassins white. And before everyone's eyes, these men in dark blue robes were the Carefree Valley's Heaven Grade Assassins that was just below the Golden Badge Assassins who held prominent status and position in the sect. To see so many Heaven Grade Assassins come out here to receive the guests from the other 2 sects, it was clear how important the Carefree Valley saw this event to be. From behind the many dark blue-robed men, a person slowly came to step forward, dressed in full scarlet robes. His face was devilishly attractive, and he then opened his mouth to say with a smile, It must have been a long arduous journey for all our esteemed guests here. My name is Yen Ju, here to welcome all of you here on behalf of our valley chief. I beg your pardon if we have been tardy in any way. His voice had just fallen when a roar of exclamation rose up among the guests before it quickly subsided into hushed murmurings within the crowd. Yen Ju. That name sounds so familiar. Don't tell me you really have not heard that name before. He is one of the top 10 assassins within the Assassin's Temple, nicknamed the Smiling Hades, the notorious Yen Ju who can take one's life without anyone knowing while smiling amicably. From the Assassin's Temple. I saw his scarlet robe and had thought that he was just a regular gold badge assassin from the Carefree Valley. The first man said in a subdued voice. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. TSK, that one there can do whatever he wants. He always likes to wear red clothes that is representative of a gold badge assassin just to confuse people. It must be known that the most highly skilled people in the Carefree Valley aren't the gold badge assassins but the ones from the Assassin's Temple above them all. I heard that every single one of them in the Assassin's Temple has attained levels that can only be described as terrifying. Will all of us here just end up embarrassing ourselves here? Probably after having overheard their discussion, someone started to feel afraid, and wanted to back out from the competition. The moment his words came out, he was immediately laughed at by everyone. How did you even manage to muster the guts to come participate in the friendship meet at all? I think you might have your life frightened right out of you looking down the sheer cliff before even going down. Chapter 200. 2. This maniac is lusting after his beautiful looks. Yen Ju listened to the hushed whispers among the guests and could not help but show scorn on his face. To think these people actually dare to come take part in this friendship meet between the sects, looks like the Faint Mist sect and the Limitless sect have become much less worthy of attention. His gaze searched through the crowd and he did not see anyone that he was seeking out. He could not help being rather surprised. The friendship meet among the sects is such an important event, is that fella not coming? He was just thinking that when a gust of cold wind blew from behind him, chillingly aggressive. His fingers immediately curled up into claws, and his fingernails suddenly grew long as he threw his hand behind him in a grab. His hands gripped tightly upon the person creeping up from behind in a sneak attack. It was a sword's hilt. Yen Ju was silent. The man whose weapon was gripped in Yen Ju's hand looked at him in befuddlement, and it was a heartbeat later that he opened his mouth to say, "You always get so passionate every time we meet." Yen Ju stared at the man without any expression on his face, and then released his grip on the sword's hilt. The tone of his voice sounded like he was speaking through tightly clenched teeth as he said, "Do you have to be so moronic every time you appear by playing such games? Always attempting to sneak up to attack me even though you clearly know that you will not succeed. Is this fella really such an idiot?" The man was tall and well-built, standing there with his arms hugging his sword. His eyes were bright and alert, exceptionally good-looking, Su Li Mo in the flesh. He watched the infuriated expression on the other man's face, and could not help but blink his eyes innocently as he said with a laugh, "I was merely just testing your reflexes, aren't I? It's so that your cultivation will not come to regress, you know." Lunatic. Yen Ju really could not be bothered with this person, always so childish to try such an old trick like a sneak attack, seeming to take delight in such mischievous pranks. Ever since they came to form a grudge when he came to hunt for the same prey with Su Li Mo during one of his training trips outside, this fella seemed to have become addicted to battling him, always picking a fight whenever they meet, which was just so bothersome. But he was an opponent with maniacal powers, their battles always inconclusive every single time, so he was unable to beat him up so bad to convince the fella to never come back to bother him again. If this came to be known by his bunch of brothers, he would surely be laughed at mercilessly. They would surely claim that Su Li Mo was just lusting for his beauteous looks, and was merely picking fights with him to draw the two of them closer in order to improve their relationship. Tui. Improve what goddamned relationship? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The entire bunch of them have nothing on their minds but always filled with such trashy and nonsensical thoughts. Yen Ju was always carrying a fake smile on his face and his patience was really running out as he stared at Su Li Mo. He then said sarcastically, "What? The Faint Mist sect has no one else but only sent you here." Su Li Mo arched up an eyebrow. "Oh. Your tone of voice sounds like you do not think very much of the Faint Mist sect, do you?" "I do not think all that much of the Faint Mist sect indeed, but I think even much less of you especially." Yen Ju said with contempt. Hearing those words, Su Liemo did not get angry, but just said with a laugh, "It wouldn't be too late for you to say those words only after you managed to defeat me, would it?" Chapter 203. This maniac is lusting after his beautiful looks over on the limitless sect side. As the final disciple of the sect leader and his most favored one, Mu Chi had naturally come to attend the meet as well. A handsome youth that was pleasing to the eye, he drew the attention of everyone wherever he went. In addition to that, he also had the top elixir cultivator's family clan backing him from behind, so people would naturally want to butter him up a little whenever they saw him. But sometimes attracting too much attention might not be a good thing altogether, or at least Mu Chi was someone who disliked having people look at him like he was some rare and precious creature. "Little brat." Someone suddenly tapped him on the shoulder, and Mu Chi raised his eyes to see who it was. His face then broke into a smile. "Sis, you're here as well." Mu Lai raised an eyebrow. "How could I not come to such an important event? How have you been recently?" Mu Chi smiled and shrugged his shoulders. "How bad can things get for me? I am able to eat and sleep well." Mu Lai pummeled him with a laugh, her eyes filled with earnest mirth. She was not close to anyone in the Mu family that was of similar age to her except for the children in her aunt's family whom she was on very good terms with. Mu Lai was 1 year older than him, and she really liked Fella who was like a brother to her. Mu Chi peered at the group of people behind the woman and then opened his mouth to ask seemingly indifferently, "Why do I not see Qin Yu? She couldn't possibly not be taking part, is she? Qin Yu met with a mishap recently and sustained injuries. She might not be coming." Mu Lai replied, and then arched an eyebrow up to look at him. "What? You miss her?" Mu Chi ignored the teasing tone of her voice and went on to ask with a worried look on his face, "She got injured? What happened? Were her injuries serious?" Seeing the youth so anxious and worried, Mu Lai then said helplessly, "The injuries were not especially serious, but the wound was rather large and quite frightening to see. You do not have to worry yourself too much, as she has someone looking after her. And that person really cared greatly for Qin Yu, to the extent that he was highly meticulous, down to the very last detail. She was aware of this little fool's feelings towards Qin Yu, but as the man beside Qin Yu was really just too strong an opponent, Mu Chi could not even compare to the little finger on that man's hand. The disparity between their powers was just too great and he might as well just give up early. And that last Qin Yu is such a powerful one herself, Mu Chi is really quite a long way off from matching up with her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hearing that, Mu Chi's eyes dimmed, seeming to have understood something, and did not continue to ask any further. On the other side, seeing that time was up, Yen Ju then whispered to a man wearing a demon mask beside him. The man nodded and then went out to the edge of the cliff before he jumped off, his movements exceptionally nimble as his disappeared from sight. Right after that, the sound of some mechanism being initiated was heard. Yen Ju then came to turn himself around to face everyone, a disarming smile on his face. Everyone can now enter the Carefree Valley. The entrance into our Carefree Valley is at the bottom of this cliff and I implore for everyone to be careful not to get yourselves hurt. You can all first come see how to pass through the obstacles safely and I shall be awaiting your arrival at the bottom. Chapter 204. This maniac is lusting after his beautiful looks. The moment he finished his words, he was already making his way down the sheer cliff with the several tens Carefree Valley heaven-grade assassins. All of them could be seen nimbly leaping and dodging their way down, the slippery and highly treacherous sheer cliff face seemingly firm and steady under their feet, like it was completely effortless and easy to do. Looks like the rumor that people of the Carefree Valley possessed unparalleled Lightfoot skills isn't exaggerated at all. Letting everyone watch them make their way down, was considered as a demonstration for everyone up there. But their movements were too quick and no one was able to see their actions clearly. It would not be an easy task getting down to the bottom of the cliff. Let it be. Just cure a dead horse like one would do for a live one. Someone then clenched his jaws tight and then jumped off from the edge. Seeing that someone had taken the lead, the people who were beside him then leapt off as well, following behind the lead guy. But very soon, a horrifying scream quickly sounded from below. Eek, a ghost. A ghost is pulling my leg. I am going to fall off. Let go of me. Let go. Help! Everyone was silent. What is happening? There are ghosts down there. So, did you manage to see where they stepped? Not too far away, two purple-robed figures stood. It was a man and a woman, one tall with a muscular build, the other tall and slender, looking very compatible to each other. These two people were Lu Junyao and Qin Yu, who arrived here late. As Qin Yu was carrying an injury, they did not take the horse carriage, but had come here through the amazing skill of traversing through dimensional space, and they had just reached the place. Qin Yu rubbed her chin and nodded. I was able to more or less see. Though I wouldn't know what's below that, but I can give it a try at least. Upon saying that, she was just going to walk over to the edge of the cliff. But before she had even taken 2 steps out, a hand closed on her arm and she was pulled back by the man. The man's displeased voice was then heard. What did you promise me? Qin Yu was taken aback a moment and she then replied obediently, I can only watch, and cannot make any moves on my own. But I haven't made any moves. Lu Junyao looked at her with a scornful face. I should just hand you a mirror to let you see the look on your own face now. See whether you can tell that your face has, I'm so excited, written all over it. Qin Yu had no words. In what way did she show she was excited? All right. Maybe just a tiny little bit. It really isn't all that much. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, people out there are all saying how great and terrifying the Carefree Valley's sheer cliff face is, and she just wants to find out for herself to see if it really lives up to its name only. Seeing everyone from the Limitless sect and the Faint Mist sect having gone down one after another, Qin Yu knitted up her brows and asked, then how are we going to get down? Lu Junyao scoffed haughtily as he glanced at the young lady. You do not have to worry about such a thing. Hug me. Qin Yu, who had been seriously waiting for his reply, was suddenly stunned, unable to react for a moment. What did you say? Chapter 201. 1. A troublesome old man. The young lady looked up at him in confusion, seeming to not have heard him clearly. Watching her, she looked somewhat adorable in her bewilderment. Lu Junyao curved up his lips, and grabbed her arm to put around his waist. He then lowered his head and said, I said hold on tightly to me. I will bring you down as it is inconvenient for you to make any great movements with the injury on your back. Qin Yu was a little perplexed. She was merely just injured and it is now inconvenient for her to do this and inconvenient for her to do that. She had sustained wounds more severe than this before, but it had not been so troublesome, you know. For some unknown reason, she felt that when she was with Lu Junyao, something feels a little strange. But what it was exactly, she just could not put her finger on it. The people up on the cliff went down one after another, and in a blink, there was already no one else there. The two of them then slowly went walking over to stand right at the edge. The wind rushing up from the bottom kept blowing the ends of their clothes up, the sharp wind cutting painfully onto people's faces. From this, it could be seen just how deep the valley really was. Hold on tight. The man's low magnetic voice reminded once again. Qin Yu hesitated for a moment, before she slipped her arm lightly around the man's waist, only gently embracing him. She could not help but feel, something wasn't right with the position they were in. The man's soft laughter sounded above her head and his arm, thoughtfully avoiding the wounds on her back, circled around the young lady into his arms, the slender figure fitting rather well against the man's tall, well-built frame. A smiley tinge came to appear upon Lu Junyao's face, and in the next instant, the two figures started to descend very quickly. The biting cold wind rushing up from the bottom of the cliff made one feel as if they had fallen into an icy lake, the powerful gusts seeming like they were able to devour everything. She could not open her eyes fully with the wind rushing into her face. Qin Yu was struggling very hard to keep her eyes open as she asked, "Why do I feel like there is something strange with this wind?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. They were clearly making their way towards the bottom of the cliff, but the wind kept blowing them up. It had been quite a while since they made their way down, but they were still hovering around in the air. Qin Yu furrowed her brows together and contemplated on it for a moment before she suddenly opened her mouth to ask, "Why don't you try not using any spirit power and don't fight against this evil wind? Then just let go of me." Lu Junyao lowered his head to look at her. "Do you know how high up we are? Even your bones will not be found if you fall down from here. Didn't you notice that the more you use your spirit powers, the stronger this evil wind retaliates? Now that you've retracted some of your power, there is merely a constant resistance pushing back at us, and is no longer initiating any attacks." Qin Yu said with a glint in his eye, and she then pointed a finger into the distance. "Look." Lu Junyao looked in the direction her finger was pointing to, and he saw a man in green robes floating in the air, the expression on his face looking a little crazed. Chapter 201. 2. A troublesome old man. He was flaying his four limbs about to attack and defend himself, like he was fighting someone, but there was no one in front of him, looking like he was hallucinating and fighting a demon that had possessed him. "Do you think that he has been possessed?" Qin Yu raised her head up to ask the man who was holding her in an embrace. Lu Junyao did not answer but just raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. "The way he is reacting makes him look like he's a little crazy, but his eyes seem to see a terrifying enemy that is attacking him. He is struggling to fight back, and the illusion he is seeing must be from this evil wind blowing." Qin Yu's pleasing voice said captivatingly. It is one of the more common types of illusory techniques called the spirit-absorbing 7 deaths array, where they are 7 illusory states, with wind, snow, fire, ice, wood, absorb, and poison, each state different from one another, but all of them very dangerous. The array we have just walked into now is one among the spirit-absorbing 7 deaths array, the wind array. As her voice fell, Lu Junyao's gaze unconsciously lit up with fervor in his eyes. "You know about spirit arrays? Just a thing or two about them?" Qin Yu said modestly as she nodded. The ends of Lu Junyao's face curled up. What he had left unspoken in his heart was that he was well versed in spirit arrays himself, a little more skilled than any regular spirit array practitioners out there. With the kind of intelligence he possessed, if he really put his mind to it, nothing was too difficult for him. His affinity with spirit arrays had started back when he was very young in the Divine Healers sect. He had accidentally stumbled into a hidden array and was trapped in it for 3 whole days and nights. Ever since then, he had resolved that he would never allow himself to fall into a difficult situation just because of his ignorance about something. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Hence, even people from the Dark Lands who had followed him for a very long time did not know just how many things their lord was skilled and well versed in, as his actions had always showed how overly reliant he was on all his subordinates, so it was natural for them to feel that the lord only possessed a set of savagely terrifying powers in cultivation, and did not know anything else. This young lady here had just said that this was one of the more common types of illusory arrays. To Lu Junyao, whatever this spirit-absorbing 7 deaths array is, it's something that he had never even heard of before. So, when the little fox said that she knew only a thing or two about spirit arrays, she was merely just being overly modest. She had probably seen more complex arrays than this, while this spirit-absorbing 7 deaths array before them now was something he was not yet able to unravel. Qin Yu then continued, "The spirit-absorbing 7 deaths array only messes with a person's mind, inflicting mental damage on their consciousness, and does not put a person's life at risk. Looks like the Carefree Valley has set this array here on this one and only way down to the cliff's bottom to intimidate the Limitless sect and the Faint Mist sect, seeking to take them down a peg or two right from the start. After saying that, the corners of her lips suddenly lifted slightly, the faint arc on her face exceptionally alluring and beautiful. But it is most unfortunate for them that they encountered me this time. Looks like they will have to be sorely disappointed. Chapter 201. 3. A troublesome old man. This was what the young lady should be like. No matter the occasion, always filled with vigor and confidence, a sharp and devious strategist exuding such strong charm, like nothing could ever bring her down. Lu Junyao looked at her with tenderness in his eyes. Let me do it. Tell me what I should do. This spirit-absorbing 7 deaths array is an illusory ice array at its heart, and all the other elemental powers array are controlled by that. So once the space that this mystical wind array sits in is frozen up with ice, all the other arrays will then self-destruct. At almost the same moment that her voice fell, the powerful hurricane suddenly ceased, and every inch of the air froze into ice. Everything blurred and turned fuzzy before their eyes for a moment before it all cleared up, where many familiar faces appeared. Having awoken from the illusory array, their bodies then plummeted straight down, and the air was filled with many horrified screams and panicked howls the very next moment. Arf, it's too high. I am falling to my death. Aya. But the expected pain and agony did not come, as their feet came to steadily step onto firm ground. It's just unbelievable. It isn't just a dream, is it? This is the bottom of the cliff. What just happened? The entrance to the carefree valley was right before their eyes, and Yen Ju with the several tens of heaven-grade assassins who had descended earlier all stood there with utter disbelief on their faces. How is this possible? It has not even been an hour and all of them have reached here at the bottom. And it seemed as though every single one of them had made it down, like nothing had happened to them at all. The spirit-absorbing 7 deaths array was specially erected against outsiders and did not affect the Carefree Valley's disciples in the slightest, hence it was not surprising that they were able to pass through the array safely. But for all these people from the other sects to make it through, it was a situation that they could not help thinking deeper into it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Just as the people on both sides were still puzzled and bewildered, a white-haired old man came walking out slowly, his body bent and crooked, his long beard almost about to drag on the ground. When Yen Ju saw that person, he then said in surprise, "Uncle Master, why have you come out?" This highly eccentric and temperamental Uncle Master had not stepped out from the sect grounds once for so many years, he could not help but wonder what could have drawn the old man to come out. He often acted erratically, seemingly a little deranged, and was now even playing the role of a carefree valley door guard. Although he was well advanced in age, he was still highly energetic, skilled in divination and techniques involving the 5 elements and 8 trigrams, where many of the carefree valley's highly lethal arrays and traps had stemmed from his hands. The old man ignored Yen Ju, and his slightly muddled-looking eyes cleared up for a moment as he turned to look at the 2 figures walking in slowly at the back of the crowd. His mouth suddenly split into a smile and he said, "Good one, my young friend. To think that you are able to break this spirit-absorbing 7 deaths array of mine. Looks like you tread on the same path as well. Truly one who is much more than you reveal yourself to be." Chapter 201. 4. A troublesome old man, and his eyes were fixed right upon Qinyu. Looks like the method of breaking the array that Qinyu deciphered was something the old man was well aware of. Hearing the old man's words, Yen Ju seemed to realize what the old man was talking about, and his gaze subconsciously turned to look in that direction. He saw the figures of a man and a woman dressed in purple clothes approaching as they walked. The young lady walking in front looked to be about 16 years old, her alluringly back-swept eyes that were like a phoenix's seemingly able to hook a person's soul right out of his body. Her complexion was smooth as white jade, the corners of her lips slightly curved up, that barely perceptible smile on her face adding a tinge of mischievousness, that gave that flamboyantly beautiful young lady's countenance an indescribable allure. The countenance of the tall, slender, well-built man behind her was also extraordinarily good-looking, that powerful and aloof aura he exuded impossible to dismiss. Even though he was consciously suppressing it, the stifling oppression was so strong it made one's heart feel highly discomfited. Qin Yu. Mu Lai's eyes lit up. I had thought that you were not coming. Have your wounds healed? Mu Lai took a few steps forward, her pretty face filled with delight. At the next moment, she then noticed that the design of the purple clothes Qin Yu was wearing today was very special, and one did not have to guess to know that the material used was top-notch quality. The lass is forever wearing all white all the time, and this is the first time she is seeing the lass dressed in a different color. But Mu Lai then looked towards the man behind her, and her face broke into a teasing smile. These clothes the two of you are wearing matches each other really well. That's what it is. She was thinking why the lass had suddenly changed her dressing, so it was to match their clothes. If one did not look closely, the shade of purple on those two sets of clothes were indeed different, but if one looked carefully, the pattern, design and style were very similar, and it was easy to see that they were specially made to order. This man has really put in quite a bit of effort. But that incredibly dense lass Qin Yu would definitely not have noticed anything. Over where the Limitless Sect's disciples were, when Mu Qi saw that Qin Yu had come, joy clearly showed on his face. But upon seeing that Lu Junyao was with her, the expression on his face turned a little gloomy. Qin Yu nodded and smiled at Qin Yu, before she turned to say to the old man, "Senior is too generous with his praise. What I know barely even scratches the surface, and I was just lucky to have seen this kind of an array before. You could say it's merely a case of a blind cat stumbling upon a dead mouse." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You're lying. This old man really detests young brats putting on a pretentious act like this the most. If you know, then you know. If you don't know, then you don't know. Simple as that. The old man glared at her a little angrily. Qin Yu was at a loss for words a moment, before she then replied truthfully. This array of seniors is frankly too commonly seen. From the way I see it, it is not qualified to be called an array as there are too many defects. Against a true expert, it will not even withstand a single blow. She really had not expected that the old man's reaction upon hearing that would be to exclaim in a huff, his eyes glaring angrily with his beard bristling, "You dare look down on this old man's array? Then you do it." The smile on Qin Yu's face slowly faded. This is such a pesky old man. Chapter 202. 1. So lucky like life was hacked ever since the day Qin Yu disappeared from the Forbidden Grounds, it was said that she was rescued by someone. But as she was gravely injured, no one had seen her all this time. It was thought that she had given up on participating in the friendship meet, but she had actually come. And after hearing what the old man said, they knew they had actually fallen prey to an array, where it was the young lady who broke the array's spell. Saving all of them, Qin Yu had always kept a rather low profile in the Faint Mist sect, seldom showing up anywhere in there. Hence, many of the Faint Mist sect's disciples had only heard of the prodigious all-element wielder in the sect but had never seen her before. So, when the people from the Limitless sect broke out in heated discussion, the faces of the Faint Mist sect's disciples were equally bewildered. "I've never seen that young lady before. Which sect is she from? Is she from the Limitless sect? So she isn't from the Faint Mist sect with all of you? I wouldn't think so. She's such a beautiful-looking young lady and so highly skilled, I will never have forgotten such a person if she was. Ah. I remember now. Is she the one where 4 different departments were falling all over themselves to fight for her to join them, the prodigy who wields all elements? I seem to remember that the first senior of the inner circle Feng Tianhen managed to win her over in the end, and she is now a member of the deviant department." That was said out aloud by someone when he suddenly recalled that eventful day. That brought about a doubtful query from a disciple of the Limitless sect. An all-element wielding prodigy? Could it be just a rumor you heard? You've got to be kidding me. An all-element wielding prodigy was an existence that was rarer than a 10th-level spirit beast. How could the Faint Mist sect possibly be so lucky to produce an impossibly prodigious all-element wielder? TSK, it seems like you are questioning what this great lord here witnessed with his very own eyes. Who could that lazy-sounding voice which sounded so impossibly haughty had come from? It was none other than the arrogant Su Li Mo himself. This fella here was infamously known to be always spoiling for a fight, and his fighting prowess was maniacally strong, ranked 5th in the Faint Mist sect's inner circle. He had also set the frightening record of 300 consecutive wins, so who could possibly have the guts to dare challenge him here? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. When the bunch of guys from the Limitless sect saw that it was Su Li Mo who spoke, all of them immediately clamped their mouths shut. They were not so crazy as to go agitate that maniac. The long-bearded old man seemed to overhear the arguing voices of everyone in the crowd, and his eyes took on an indiscernible glint as he looked at the young lady. He then opened his mouth to say, "Little one, our carefree valley isn't inferior to the Faint Mist sect in any way. If you are to join us, the carefree valley will take you in as an esteemed prize disciple, where you will be accorded the highest honor and glory." He had lived more than half his life, and his eyes had never been wrong about people. This young lady was definitely not someone of common stock. Yen Ju and his bunch of assassins were all frozen. What just happened here? Is the Uncle Master trying to poach from the other sects? Or is he just trying to poach only because the young lady belongs to their arch-rival, the Faint Mist sect? Chapter 202. 2. So lucky like life was hacked. The Faint Mist sect's disciples immediately became highly indignant. This old man who had suddenly popped out from nowhere, is he even of sound mind at all? They were here to participate in the 3 great sects friendship meet, and while the event was still going on, this old man is actually trying to poach one of their members so blatantly, right before everyone's eyes like this? Su Li Mo's brows suddenly twitched slightly, and he was just about to explode when he saw the exquisitely beautiful little young lady take a couple of steps forward, before she went on to say with a smile, "Thank you, my senior, for the encouraging favor you've shown me, but I am already a disciple of the Faint Mist sect, and one must not be a heartless ingrate. If I am to really leave them, not to mention how disappointed the teachers in the Faint Mist sect will be with me, don't you think that everyone in Carefree Valley will surely suspect whether I will readily choose to side with a stronger power in future?" The old man's gaze flashed with a glint, seemingly a little taken by surprise. She had not only rejected his offer, but had come up with a reason that was so irrefutable. He then laughed softly and said to the young lady, "Since that is the case, then this old man shall not coerce our young little friend here any further, but I still hope that our little friend can come pay us a visit at our Carefree Valley more often as a guest." Immediately upon saying that, he quickly pushed something into Qin Yu's hand at lightning speed. And just like the way he had appeared, he then disappeared soundlessly without any trace. Qin Yu was stunned for a moment as she blinked her eyes in bewilderment, and she saw that there was a strange spherical green jade stone in her hand. Upon the stone, the character, punishment, was carved intricately on it. This is. Others might not recognize that item, but Yen Ju knew very clearly what it was, and he could not help but feel a corner of his mouth twitch. What kind of an affliction had struck the Uncle Master's brain recently? How can he possibly give away something like that? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. What is that thing? A heavenly grade assassin who was standing closer to Yen Ju asked in puzzlement. That is the Heaven Punishment Hall's Hall Chief's command token. Have all of you forgotten? Although the Uncle Master is always acting eccentric and unpredictable, he is still the head of the Carefree Valley's 5 great Hall Chiefs. The holder of that Heaven Punishment Command token is able to command at least half the disciples in Carefree Valley, and its authority is only beneath that of the Assassin's Temple. Yen Ju explained to the man, and his gaze then turned to look at Qin Yu. For the young lady to be able to gain our Uncle Master's favor so much, you must possess some highly exceptional qualities. Holding the Heaven Punishment token that supposedly holds such great authority, Qin Yu felt as if it was just one hot potato in her hands. Her brows knitted together as she said, "This item here, may I implore your esteemed self to help me return it to your uncle master? The young miss does not need to refuse the gift. Since our uncle master has given the heaven punishment command token to you, he definitely trusts you enough to hold possession of it. The young miss will henceforth always be a guest to the Carefree Valley, and with that command token, you will be able to come and go as you please throughout the entire Carefree Valley. Yen Ju said with a soft laugh. Chapter 202. 3. So lucky like life was hacked. Everyone there could not help but start to wonder. Just how lucky can that young lady possibly be? To think that she had won the right to come and go as she pleased in Carefree Valley just like that. Moreover, isn't she a member of the Faint Mist sect? Those two sects were always at loggerheads with each other. Isn't the Carefree Valley afraid that she will come in to spy on any of their secrets? All of this is really puzzling no matter which way one looked at it. Hearing what the man said, Qin Yu could only keep the token away properly. She will return it to that senior when she has the chance. Will everyone please come with me? It was a completely different scene at the bottom of the cliff, a sea of green with all kinds of lush greenery. Winter had not passed, but it was different here from the biting cold at Faint Mist sect. It was instead gently warm in here, picturesque with mountains and waterfalls, the scenery highly soothing and pleasant, a stark contrast from their inhabitants who were famed to be cold dark assassins. Over on the Faint Mist sect's group of disciples, Mu Lai and Ming Yi kept together with Qin Yu and the several others they were familiar with back in the sect. Little junior girl, you're really good, you know. Never has there ever been a precedent where a disciple of the Faint Mist sect is able to come and go at will into the Carefree Valley. Everyone knows that the Carefree Valley has always been highly secretive with their lair, and they have never allowed any outsider to set foot inside. The one who spoke was that effeminate-looking man from the deviant department. She had gone missing for 2 whole days and this fella had not even noticed a thing. What a heartless creature he is. Qin Yu merely smiled and did not say anything. How are you feeling? Are you really feeling all right now? Mu Lai stretched her hand out seeking to hold the young lady on her shoulder, but ended up clasping nothing but air. The man who had kept himself at a set distance behind Qin Yu all this time held the young lady's arm and pulled her away from the other young woman. Catching the young woman looking at him, the man then smiled slightly and opened his mouth to explain, the wound on her back has not fully healed. Be careful to not touch her there. Mu Lai was subconsciously startled, her brows raising up in surprise. She had not looked at him that closely before this. The man's eyes. When did they turn black? Qin Yu felt a little helpless. She flung the man's hand off her arm and raised her eyes to look at him. I am fine. You do not need to so anxious about it. A slightly unfriendly smile crooked up at the ends of Lu Junyao's lips. Do not go 2 meters out from my line of sight. Had she become so unworthy of trust now? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Because Lu Lanji had some tasks he had to deal with, he would come here a little later. Su Li Mo was standing together with Ming Jing and he was watching the tall purple-robed figure as he rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Who is that man? Why does it seem like I have never seen him before? Ming Jing then replied indifferently. Neither have I ever seen him. A soft tug was felt pulling at a corner of his robes and Su Li Mo lowered his head to look. He saw a young skinny little youth looking up at him with his head raised up, his face a little abashed as the boy looked at him. The boy then said in a weak voice, 5th senior. Xing Tong. Chapter 202. 4. So lucky like life was hacked. Su Li Mo raised his eyebrows in surprise as the little youth was really so small in size. As a tall guy, looking down at him like that was really rather tiring, hence he decided he might as well just pick the small-sized youth up and carry him in the crook of his elbow. What is it? You miss your 5th senior, or has that bunch of scoundrels been bullying you again? Xing Tong's cheeks turned slightly red as he shook his head. The Faint Mist sect's top 5 ranked disciples had always been on especially good terms with each other, and Suli Mo was 5th in rank, always running over to the deviant department to look for the others. Over time, he also became familiar with the people in the deviant department. Xing Tong had then started to address him as 5th senior, the skinny little fella, a rather obedient and innocent boy that Suli Mo had become rather fond of. At times when the others in the deviant department made fun of the little youth, Suli Mo would also stand up for him, so Xing Tong liked and respected this senior fellow disciple quite a bit as well. 5th senior, that man is one of the deviant department's teachers. He is a highly skilled 7-star grade teacher of ours, and his name is Lu Baiqian. Xing Tong said earnestly, helping Suli Mo to clear up his puzzlement. Suli Mo was taken aback. A 7-star grade teacher. I heard that he was recommended by the sect leader himself. The man is really very highly capable. I am unable to see through him at all. Xing Tong said with a wary glance towards the purple-robed figure. The man was clearly always seemingly so smiley and amiable, but one just could not help but feel a little terrified of him. Especially that pair of eyes of his, one was just unable to look straight into them. Hearing the boy's words, Suli Mo was even more puzzled. Really? Why have I never heard about a person like that before? But before he could think any further about it, his thoughts were suddenly interrupted. They had reached deep into the mountain valley and they were going to cross an iron chain bridge. Right below that bridge, countless ghosts and monstrous spirits were hidden, and one might be dragged down into the depths in a moment's distraction. It was said that a great number of people had not made it across the bridge. The iron chain bridge was not very long, roughly about 3 to 4 meters in length, but that journey was by no means short under such conditions. Moreover, the planks on the bridge looked to be rather aged, seemingly old and tattered. The bridge's chains swayed under the gusty wind, looking highly dangerous. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, right after this bridge, will be the Carefree Valley's main gates. Yen Ju said to everyone with a faint smile. This bridge had already existed before the founding of the Carefree Valley sect itself and is said to be close to 100 years old. Only one person may cross at one time, and that person must make it across within 10 heartbeats, or the monsters beneath the bridge will come surging up. Upon finishing his words, he tapped the tip of his feet and the red figure was upon the bridge in the next instant, moving like a fleeting shadow and reaching the other side in a blink. The entire process had been incredibly quick, over the span of 3 heartbeats at most, an astounding feat to see. The several tens heaven-grade assassins followed quickly right after, fleeting across one after another, and none of them had taken more than 7 heartbeats. And throughout that entire process, besides just a slight sway, the iron chain bridge quickly fell quiet once more. It did not rock all that much, which showed how much more superior their Lightfoot skills really were. It doesn't seem all that difficult. Let me give it a try. A stout and well-muscled man slowly stepped onto the bridge. Chapter 203. 1. The Assassin Headquarters, Carefree Valley/B. When he went onto the bridge, maybe it was because of his brawny body, the iron chains swung left and right, but quickly fell back silent. The man smiled happily to himself and went on to swing the bridge more. He was just about to summon up his powers to tread his way over when the steady iron chain bridge suddenly shook and trembled violently. Tens of withered thin black claws then reached up from under the bridge, grabbing around his ankles in a vice grip. The sharp claws tore through his skin and bright red blood flowed down from his ankles. The man was so terrified his face drained of all color, wailing in fright towards the people up there. Help! Save me! Please save me! That person was a disciple from the Limitless sect, and when they saw him in that situation, one of his companions immediately leapt forward wanting to hack off those claws and rescue the man. But before he could even make a move, he had just touched the man's body when his own face started to turn black, his body stiffening as he stood frozen in place. Mu Chi knitted his brows together, like he wanted to do something, but the clear melodious voice of a young lady suddenly reached his ears. "Don't move. Their bodies are already tainted with the air of death. Nothing you do can save them now." It was Qin Yu. Mu Chi's heart thumped, and he turned his head to look at her. "Qin Yu, you must surely know of a way to save them. Can you help me rescue them?" Qin Yu had not even opened her mouth when she suddenly felt someone pinch her on her hip. She raised her eyes and saw the pair of eyes giving her a fierce warning look, seemingly telling her to mind her own business. Qin Yu gave him a reassuring smile, indicating that she would not be making any moves herself. Her gaze then scanned over the crowd and she then found the person she was searching for. She smiled at him and beckoned for him to come with a hand. "Xing Tong, come on over here." When the youth who had been huddled beside Su Liemo heard his name being called, he immediately got up and ran over to her obediently, before he called out to her happily, "Big sis Qin Yu." Su Liemo was stunned for a while. Is he seeing things here? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. That imp Xing Tong has always been terrified of people and would seldom get so close to anyone else but him, afraid to even speak to others at all. When did he start to become so loving to another person? And it looks like he likes that person more than the boy likes him. A slightly bitter feeling rose up inside. That hollow-hearted little imp. Xing Tong came obediently before the young lady, feeling a little scared as he glanced at the man who was staring at him with a rather unfriendly gaze. He then carefully shifted his steps to one side and his voice was soft and wary as he asked, "Big sis Qin Yu, you called me over for something?" Qin Yu smiled and ruffled the young youth's head. "Xing Tong, this is your area of expertise. Let those monsters down below go to sleep for half an hour. That should be very easy for you to do, isn't it?" Chapter 203. 2. The Assassin Headquarters, Carefree Valley/B. The young youth nodded and then lifted his smooth-skinned face with its exquisite features. He was no longer afraid of people seeing the mark on his face, and that was all because of this person before him. She had shown him great warmth and opened his mind, making him feel highly confident of himself. "Big sis Qin Yu, I will get that done." The young youth's voice was filled with resolve as he spoke, and he then took a few steps forward. He stretched a small hand out and a mystifying force formed in his palm before it went surging down into the seemingly bottomless pit below the iron chain bridge. A moment passed and it seemed as though it had turned peacefully quiet in an instant, where the people could no longer hear any noise. The two people on the bridge fainted away from exhaustion, but it looked as if they were otherwise fine, suffering only a fright. The people from the Limitless sect then immediately moved to go carry those two people off the bridge. Everyone had better hurry on over right now. The stability on the bridge will last only for an half hour at most, and there are so many of us here, so let's not waste any time. Qin Yu opened her mouth to say. But they were all probably shocked by what had happened to those two people earlier, and no one dared to be careless anymore. Upon hearing Qin Yu's urging, they all quickly made their way across, almost flying over the iron chain bridge. "Xing Tong has grown more adept at controlling you powers. You're so good at it now." Qin Yu praised the young youth with a smile on her face. The young youth bit on his lip, feeling rather embarrassed, but did not say anything. But one could easily see the undisguised happiness showing on his face. He was still like a little child, easily happy and contented upon hearing just a single word of praise. Everyone remained safe and sound this time round as well, having crossed over the iron chain bridge where 9 out of 10 people would usually be injured. Things were going unbelievably smooth for all of them, and the Carefree Valley's attempt to intimidate the other two sects was failing miserably. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. For the people who were taking part in the friendship meet, some of them had come to the Carefree Valley to see whether the infamous Cliff of Death was truly that terrifying, while some others had chosen to take a time-saving shortcut into the place. The latter group took a completely different route. They had come to the Carefree Valley through a special teleportation portal. Among this group of people were Yan Ning Luo, Lian Xiaojia, Xianyuan Che and several other people. Because they came here through the teleportation portal, they actually reached the inside earlier than the other group who came to the Carefree Valley earlier. At that moment, they were already seated and waiting for the other group in the Carefree Valley's guest hall. Look at all the assassins from the Carefree Valley, every one of them are wearing masks regardless whether they are male or female. Even the servants serving tea have their faces veiled. Just how ugly looking can they be? Lien Xiaojie tilted his head towards Xianyuan Che, and said jokingly. Chapter 203. 3. The Assassin Headquarters, Carefree Valley. Xianyuan Che lifted his cup of tea and took a small sip. That is because even their servants are all highly skilled assassins, and they are just keeping in line with the norm of their profession. They cannot afford to be recognized when they carry out their missions, and that is why they all have to be masked. Lien Xiaojie nodded, his gaze glancing at the cold and aloof young woman opposite. She just sat there, and it was probably because of her icy personality, no one around her was talking to her. She always had two other young women following her around, but for some unknown reason, they had not come with her this time. Lien Xiaojie curved his lips up in a smile, as he nudged the man beside him with his shoulder. With such a frosty personality, what kind of a man do you think it would be that will finally conquer a woman like that? You're well suited for that. Xianyuan Che said emotionlessly. Lien Xiaojie was startled by that reply, and he then said with a laugh, having fun at my expense? Is it because you are actually still unable to let go of her and was unhappy hearing what I just said? Hearing that, Xianyuan Che laughed lightly, his good-looking countenance tinged with a barely perceptible but meaningful smile. I thought that since you are always talking about her before me, I thought that you might have developed an interest in the faint mist sect's greatest beauty instead. Lien Xiaojie almost choked, before he glared at the man beside him. Nonsense. I wouldn't want to press a warm face against cold buttocks. Oh, so you're just not confident, and is worried that it will be a loss of face when you fail to conquer the woman. Xianyuan Che said, his face looking like something just dawned on him. Lien Xiaojie knew that he would not win this guy in an argument, so he just scoffed coldly with a grunt, and then clamped his mouth shut, not going to say another word. Have the people from the Faint Mist sect and the Limitless sect arrived? Feng Qi and Yi Han, who were just about to make their way to the Carefree Valley's guest hall, immediately froze in their steps when they heard that voice, a little surprised when they saw the man walking out slowly from the bamboo house. Yi Han was a man whose face had ruggedly good looks, a towering and brawny figure, an assassin in the Assassin's Temple well known for his strength. It was said that the strength of those fists could kill a ferocious wild beast, their power explosively powerful. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. "You, Jean, you're here in the valley?" Feng Qi asked, his eyes blinking in surprise. Remembering the man's question, he then nodded. Someone came in to inform us that they have arrived, and we were just about to make our way over there. He then seemed to recall something else after saying that and opened his mouth to say, "Oh right. You asked me to look for a young lady with outstanding looks and unsurpassing skills in medicine, and I have located a few targets." "No need. I already found her." Zhan Chen interrupted the man, and then went on walking off in front. Feng Qi and Yi Han looked at each other. Is he going to the guest hall? Has the sun risen up in the west today? Why does it feel like there's something strange about the man ever since he came back from his last trip? Chapter 203. 4. The Assassin Headquarters, Carefree Valley. Jean did manage to bring the sacred Buddha palm lotus back the last time, right? Feng Qi asked. Yi Han nodded. That's right, and it now kept in the lotus pond behind the bamboo house in perfect condition. People from the other side had come to ask about it, but Jean told them he did not see the sacred Buddha palm lotus. What does that even mean? Feng Qi's brows furrowed in puzzlement. Is he regretting it now and does not want to hand the sacred Buddha palm lotus over to them? Yi Han shook his head, indicating that he does not know as well. After defusing the danger twice in 2 obstacles, they did not encounter anything else but came to reach the Carefree Valley's guest hall. Because the Carefree Valley was nestled among the mountains, the materials used for their houses were mainly stone and bamboo. It made everything look unconventional and refreshingly new, causing everyone's eyes to light up. It must have been an arduous journey for our guests who came such a long way. Please come in and have a seat to get some rest. Yen Ju gestured invitingly with a smile. The valley chief will arrive in a moment. Qin Yu found herself a seat at the corner and sat down, which was coincidentally nearer to her and was quieter. There were 2 empty seats beside, and Lu Junyao went on to sit down beside her while Mu Lai took up the seat on the other side. Qin Bei, who had not seen his elder sister for days, was not even able to get close before finding himself being squeezed out from both sides. There was no need to mention how aggrieved he felt when he had no choice but to go silently sit at the next table. Qin Yu shook her head helplessly and gave the youth a comforting smile, signaling that they'll talk later when there was a chance. She had just settled into her seat when she felt a rather familiar gaze was fixed on her. She raised her eyes up to look and saw that it was one that she had not seen for quite some time, Yen Ning Luo. She had seen the woman quite often back at the deviant department, but ever since the time that she accidentally overheard the woman confess her feelings to Qin Yili and was rejected, she had not seen that woman come again. Qin Yu was thinking that the fellow Little Yi had never known how to treat a lady right and be gentle with them, and Yen Ning Luo had probably given up after having been rejected. But upon seeing that indecipherable look in the woman's eyes that were staring right at her now, she did not see any tranquility nor peace, but saw a scary dark surge rising in them. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Yu curved up the ends of her lips, and turned her eyes away. The valley chief arrives. With that announcement sounding outside the door, a tall figure came walking in slowly among the people. A middle-aged man about 40 years of age, dressed in a long light green robe. He wasn't that young a man anymore, and could see a certain kind of wise and mature charm from his face, and when he did not smile, he exuded a certain forbidding air naturally. His footsteps were exceptionally firm and steady as he walked towards the seat on the elevated platform. His face then broke into a slow smile. It's the day of the 3 great sects friendship meet once again, and it is being held in the Carefree Valley this year, which is such a great honor for us. I hope to be able to strengthen the friendship among our 3 great sects through our friendship meet this year, and may this friendship last much longer. Chapter 204. 1. Teammates like a bunch of pigs. Upon hearing those words, everyone raised their cups and murmured politely. Qin Yu arched up an eyebrow. You really can't judge a book by its cover. She would have thought that the valley chief of the Carefree Valley, as the head of so many assassins and killers in the Carefree Valley, would be a fierce and fiendish-looking man who exuded a highly murderous aura. Never had she thought that he would be so presentable-looking, where he could be easily mistaken as any regular businessman out there, graceful and suave. Nobody would really believe that he was actually the leader of a whole horde of assassins. The word outside about this valley chief of the Carefree Valley wasn't really that great. It was said that he was a treacherous and ruthless man, highly shrewd and sly. Seemed like a person's looks could really be deceiving. What? You're interested in that person? The man right beside her asked with a soft laugh. Qin Yu curved up the corners of her lips and shook her head. I merely seem to be unable to sense the slightest hint of killer's instinct in that man. He looks a lot more like a regular person who does not possess any cultivated powers at all. Lu Junyao was a little surprised as he looked at her and then went on to say, You've actually hit the nail right on its head this time. The Carefree Valley's valley chief is indeed just a regular person with absolutely no powers. How is that possible? Qin Yu blinked her eyes incredulously. Then how did he come to be able to take on the position of the valley chief? With no powers of cultivation, if anyone came to harbor any insidious thoughts against him, wouldn't he be completely defenseless? Seeming to understand the doubts in her mind, Lu Junyao went on to open his mouth to explain, besides the mysterious assassin's temple, do you know what the Carefree Valley is most famous for? What? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Besides the assassin's temple, the other most talked about thing by people are the 4 demon ghosts who are never away from the Carefree Valley's valley chief, Ji Yanlong's side. It is said that the powers those people possess are so powerful that it surpasses what the constellation lands can withstand. They are always at Ji Yanlong's side, protecting the man, watching at a distance even when he is asleep. Hence, anyone who seeks to sneak up to harm him will never be given a chance to strike. Why would the 4 demon ghosts be so loyal to him? How is the Carefree Valley's valley chief able to tame them so completely? Qin Yu asked in bewilderment. Lu Junyao looked at the young lady and his eyes changed subtly. It was only a while later that he opened his mouth to say, although Ji Yanlong does not possess any cultivated powers, he has an incredibly shrewd and astute mind, and a highly heaven-defying ability. He is able to return a dead soul to life, by implanting it into a live person's body. This method is safer and more secure than forcibly taking over, as there will be no side effects, by pure and simple replacement, living once again by assuming another person's identity. Having spoken up to that point, he suddenly paused a moment. And it is that amazing ability that led Ji Yanlong to befriend people with all sorts of extraordinary talents and skills, and be willing to work under him, as the man's unique ability is as good as them having 2 lives. The 4 demon ghosts are actually already dead souls resurrected in live people's bodies. Chapter 204. 2. Teammates like a bunch of pigs. Hearing that, Qin Yu knitted her brows, her expression darkening. Without knowing why, she suddenly thought of Qin Tianlin. Just how was he resurrected? Could it have something to do with this Carefree Valley's valley chief? I heard that the Faint Mist sect recruited quite a number of outstanding talents during their recruitment trials this year, and they even got an all-element wielder during the test. I wonder if that prodigy is here today. Ji Yanlong's voice was warm and gentle, smiling as he delivered the words. Hearing those words, Qin Yu had not even yet opened her mouth when Yan Ju said from a distance away, Valley Chief might not be aware of this, but when I came to hear about that, I was honestly highly astounded by it. To think that that prodigious all-element wielder is actually a very young lady. Oh. Ji Yanlong raised an eyebrow in surprise, his gaze subconsciously turning scan over the area where the Faint Mist sect's disciples were seated. Upon seeing that, Qin Yu had no choice but to stand herself up, and bowed her head slightly. Greetings to the Valley Chief. Ji Yanlong stared at the young lady with such an exquisitely beautiful countenance, his expression a little taken aback. It seemed like he had never thought that the rumored all-element wielder would be such an outrageously beautiful-looking little lass. But he was stunned only for an instant, returning back to his senses very quickly. He then nodded with a smile on his face and said, I can see that you're such an intelligent child with just one look. The Faint Mist sect is truly fortunate. Those words clearly sounded like they were just said out of politeness, like he himself did not really believe them all that much. Qin Yu merely curved up the ends of her lips and did not respond to the man, sitting back down after having greeted the host. While everyone was murmuring in conversation, the sound of footsteps could be heard approaching from outside the doors. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. In the lead was a tall and lean-figured man in black robes, with an exceptionally outstanding-looking countenance. His eyes long narrow like a crimson phoenix, his thin lips captivating, extremely good-looking facial features. A fingernail-sized blossom that was dark as ink marked a corner right below his eye, the flower petals blooming in multiple layers, looking exceptionally enchanting, which added a sort of devilish air to that handsome countenance. 2 men trailed right behind the first, one good-looking and heroic-looking, the other brawny and muscular, standing on the left and right just slightly behind the black-robed man, looking like his loyal protectors. It could be because of his exceptional senses, as Shi Zhanchen immediately saw that familiar figure the moment he came in. His gaze stared fixedly at the young lady who was dressed in a pale purple dress, a striking contrast against her snowy fair skin, her tiny face captivating and alluring. Seeming to have noticed his gaze upon her, the young lady slowly turned to look towards him, where she even smiled when she saw him. Shi Zhanchen's heart thumped, and he could not help but wonder when did she regain consciousness, and whether she had recovered from her injuries. Chapter 204. 3. Teammates like a bunch of pigs. He had seen her block that highly lethal strike for him with his own eyes back on that day. When he saw her fall into unconsciousness, he really did not know how to feel, but had felt an unbearable wrenching pain in his heart, like needles piercing into it. With that thought still on his mind, Shi Zhanchen suddenly noticed the tall slender figure seated right beside the young lady. It was that mysterious and regal purple-robed man who suddenly appeared, who went against the odds in that critical situation to save them. The enormous dark zombie that he had been completely helpless against could not even stand up against one single strike under that man's hands. It was an absolute instant kill, the man's powers so strong that he had no choice but to admit defeat against that man. Though Shi Zhanchen could easily be considered to be one of the most highly skilled pugilists throughout these lands, his powers was far beneath that man in comparison. The one thing that he could be very certain of was that the man could not possibly be from these low-leveled constellation lands. He could very well have come down from above. Upon seeing the person who just stepped in through the door, Ji Yanlong was rather surprised. He then said with a laugh, "To think that you did not leave the valley today. The sun must have risen up from the west today." Although Shi Zhanchen was the leader of the Assassin's Temple, he seldom handled any of its affairs, all the tasks managed by a few of his subordinates. His personality was a little strange, never fond of noisy and crowded events like this, always hiding far away and would only return about 10 days to half a month later. So it was rather bizarre this time. Not only had he not shied away from the event, he had even come here into the guest banquet hall. And since he had come, that would also mean that he was going to participate in the friendship meet. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Upon seeing Shi Zhanchen, Yan Zhu's face also lit up with joy. He immediately went over to the man in a few strides and said, "Chief, it's great that you've come." Everyone was still trying to guess at the black-robed man's identity, and when they heard Yan Zhu address the man as chief, everybody could not help but be stunned. Yan Zhu was among the top 10 assassins in the Assassin's Temple and an entity that was more revered than the Carefree Valley's Gold Badge assassins. For a person to be addressed by Yan Zhu as chief, there was only just one man. Ji Yanlong smiled and then said to everyone in the hall, "This is a good sign for this year's friendship meet." Even the temple chief of the Assassin's Temple, who had never once taken part for so many years, has come. Shi Zhanchen's gaze did not turn as he went walking over to an empty seat to sit himself down, not saying a single word the entire time. Towards Ji Yanlong's and Yan Zhu's warm welcome, he did not show the slightest response, his entire person seemingly exceptionally cold and aloof. He was rather different from the time he met Qin Yu in the Faint Mist Sect's Forbidden Grounds, seemingly rather unfamiliar. He had clearly been both passionate and easy to talk to back in the Forbidden Grounds, but the man at that moment felt to be highly aloof, and detached from the rest of the world, polar opposites of two different people. Chapter 204. For teammates like a bunch of pigs. It was during that moment of quiet that a disciple among the Faint Mist Sect seats stared at Shi Zhanchen for a good while before he opened his mouth to say, "Might I ask what is the name of this esteemed gentleman?" Shi Zhanchen did not reply but just looked at the person indifferently. Everyone was a little confused. What was that person asking the Assassin's Temple's temple chief for his name for? Although it wasn't entirely unreasonable for him to do that, it was still rather puzzling. When the Faint Mist Sect's disciple saw that the man was ignoring him, he did not become angry but said with a smile, "The greatest assassin throughout the land, Shi Zhanchen, nicknamed the Soul Reaper, able to have a man die in his dreams without anyone knowing, their faces contorted in horror as their souls depart from their bodies." It is said that only dead people have ever seen what he looks like, but for one single unfortunate coincidence, where the assassination attempt was discovered by someone. He had just managed to escape, but he was supposedly crippled for life in the end. What is the person trying to say? He did not make everyone wait for long as the man continued on to say, the person who witnessed the assassination did not manage to see what the assassin looked like too clearly, but he saw a highly prominent mark on his face, which was a black blossom just under the corner of his left eye. A black blossom. And under the corner of the man's eye, is really a blossoming bloom. Could it be that this man is really the divine-level assassin of legend? It must be known that though this divine-level assassin was someone that people greatly revered and worshipped, his hands had come to be tainted with the blood of too many people of power and authority. Shi Zhanchen's bounty on the most wanted list was a cool 10 million in gold, and if anyone were to get their hands on that, they would be able to live worry-free for the rest of their lives, even if they were to squander their money every single day. Feng Qi immediately looked at the crowd warily, as if he was fearful that they might ambush Shi Zhanchen at any moment. With so much already said, it wouldn't exactly be nice if Shi Zhanchen still did not say anything to establish his stand on the matter. So went on to look emotionlessly at the person and stated, so what if that's true? His reaction was really just too calm for words, like he was not worried in the least with being recognized. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It was exactly that infuriating calm demeanor that got gnawed at people, irritating them. The faint mist sect's disciple gave a scoffing laugh, nothing much, but I am just curious to see if I should spread the word that you are hidden here in the Carefree Valley, as that might make the Carefree Valley much more rowdy. Before that, you have to ascertain that you still have possession of your life. Lu Junyao then said nonchalantly. Qin Yu beside him could not even be bothered to say anything. So it seemed like the faint mist sect would actually have such a foolish fella to come blatantly taunt and challenge a person in their own territory. Does he really not fear death, or does he think that the Carefree Valley, a place that specializes in nurturing cold-blooded and heartless assassins, was just a joke? That foolish brain on him has really dragged everyone down. Chapter 205. 1. First disagreeable word and teasing starts. Not only Qin Yu, but everyone else from the faint mist sect were staring at the disciple who spoke like they were looking at a pig. So what if he knew Shi Zhanchen's identity? Would he be someone who would be afraid of being persecuted? Not to mention that he was the leader of the Carefree Valley's assassin temple. Just any single one person from the 10 great assassins under him would be a big enough headache for anyone to tangle with, what's more the many other subordinates. To think that that person would dare to challenge Shi Zhanchen so blatantly, does he think that he has lived too long? With every single person in the assassin's temple, which one among them did not worship Shi Zhanchen like a deity? How could they possibly tolerate anyone being so impetuous to their idol? The faces of Feng Qi and Yi Han immediately changed, and even the ever-smiling and good-natured Yan Ju expression had turned rather cold. Is this fool tired of living? How dare he challenge the chief so openly like this? Immediately, he was unable to hold himself back and he started to throw a fit. He looked at the faint mist sect's disciple with an indeterminable smile. I wonder if your actions had stemmed from your own volition, or were they carried out under the faint mist sect's instructions? It looks like the faint mist sect is well prepared to let things take an ugly turn during this year's friendship meet. When the disciple heard Yan Ju say that, he then probably realized at that moment that this place was not the faint mist sect where he could shoot his mouth off as he pleased uninhibited, but was actually the territory of a bunch of people who killed without even needing to blink, and he immediately became rather resentful but did not dare to say another word anymore. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But Yan Ju was not about to let him off so easily. He laughed coldly as he swept his gaze over the group of faint mist sect's disciples, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he said, the faint mist sect is really becoming more and more half-hearted about events between the sections. Even with such an important event like the 3 great sects' friendship meet, they can only afford to send such unworthy disciples, which only tell me one thing. It looks like the leading position among the three great sects will soon undergo a change in ownership. Indeed, among the people from the Faint Mist sect who came this time, besides Su Li Mo who was a highly familiar face to everyone, many of the other disciples were seemingly newly joined recruits, so Yan Ju's words could not be completely denied. And that disciple who had spoken up without even thinking it through at all, was really just too foolish. Trying to expose Xizhan Chen's identity on such an occasion, how could the Carefree Valley possibly be so courteous to give him face? That disciple was suddenly highly flustered and his face burned a deep red, not knowing what could possibly have come over him just now that gave him the courage to taunt a legendary divine-level assassin just like that. That person was an absolute demon who killed without even blinking, his hands immersed in blood. Su Liemo silently cursed several choice expletives inwardly in his heart before he turned to look at the unfriendly-looking Yan Ju. He then tried to smooth things over as he said, "That fella does not know his own place and was only babbling nonsense here. I would think that the Carefree Valley would not take it to heart. I guess he became too excited when he saw the land's greatest assassin and blurted out things he should not have said, which is something entirely understandable. I would think that the Valley Chief should be able to understand the heart of a person who reveres people who possess such great power." Chapter 205. 2. First disagreeable word and teasing starts. Ji Yen Long smiled and nodded his head. That is naturally understandable. Just forget it since it is just a misunderstanding. If the relationship between our two great sects turns sour because of such a small matter, both sides would only stand to lose with nothing to gain. Since the Valley Chief had given the Faint Mist sect a way out, Yan Ju knew that he could not pursue it any further. His face was dark as he thought to himself, the one who dared to disrespect the chief, he was not going to spare him. He's already here within the Carefree Valley, so even if he did not leave his life here, he would at least have to leave a few layers of his skin behind to make him remember this. That will make him realize just how insignificant the weight he carries really is, and to not think he is all that great just because he is a member of the Faint Mist sect. Forgive us for the affront. Su Liemo then said as he bowed his head slightly towards the expressionless Xizhan Chen. Xizhan Chen's tone of voice was indifferent. It's nothing. I never did care about such things at all. The sudden dangerous atmosphere just now immediately dissipated and it felt a little awkward for a moment. Especially for the spectating Limitless sect, who did not know whether they should act as if they did not understand what they just heard or to pretend they did not even hear anything. In that case, I implore for everyone to first rest and reorganize yourselves, to refresh and hone your energies. Once the mist around the fleeting cloud fortress has dispersed, we will then make our way up. Ji Yen Long then gave a few instructions to the servants waiting at his side before he said to everyone, "Everyone can go rest for a while in the guests' rooms that have been prepared for you, and when it is time, I will send my people to go inform everyone." The fleeting cloud fortress was one of the wondrous sights in the Constellation Lands and it was the most mysterious place in the entire Carefree Valley. The place was constantly surrounded by swirling mist that would not disperse, only revealing itself when night fell. It had a stairway that had more than 10,000 steps, stretching so far that the end could not be seen. It was said that it was a palace and almighty entity from far ancient times magically conjured up with divine powers, and the place contained countless strange and mysterious secret martial arts manuals. If anyone were to be fortunate enough to gain the legacy of that almighty entity, they must surely be luck and fortune accumulated over the person's several past lives. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qingyu closed her eyes and sat in a half-lotus position on the bed. The tips of her ears pricked up and she heard the faint and almost undetectable sound of footsteps outside the door. The clear and melodious voice that had a robust texture to it then sounded, calling out gently. "Qingyu." She opened her eyes, feeling a little bewildered, but she still climbed off the bed and went to open the door. A lean black-robed figure stood outside, and upon seeing her behind the door, his beautiful eyes seemed to flash briefly with a bright glint. "Why have you come?" The corners of Qing Yu's lips lifted up slightly, as she went on to ask with a smile. Shi Zhanchen's measuring gaze swept over her from head to toe quickly, before he immediately asked, "How are your injuries? Have you recovered?" That would not happen so quickly. She was in so much pain she immediately fell into a dead faint that day, so her injuries could not have been light. Chapter 205. 3. First disagreeable word and teasing starts. Hearing his highly concerned words, Qin Yu was taken aback a moment before she smiled slightly and shook her head. "I am fine now." Shi Zhanchen was silent for a while before he suddenly asked in a low whisper, "Back then, why did you go block that strike for me?" Qin Yu raised an eyebrow and looked at the man. "Speaking of that, I would really like to ask you. You intentionally went to aggravate that dark zombie to draw its attention onto yourself. Were you trying to give me a chance to run away at the cost of your own life?" Shi Zhanchen hesitated a moment before he acknowledged with a soft "Why? We were merely two strangers who met in passing that day. Or were you always so righteous and valiant to raise your sword to help others all along?" Qin Yu could not help but smile and ask. "Only with you." Shi Zhanchen's eyes narrowed. "Moreover, you saved my life once before, so that makes you my savior." They were not just strangers who had met for the first time. At least that was the case for him, where he could feel right in his bones a familiarity towards her, like they had known each other for many years. Moreover, to him, she was a very important existence, like she existed in a memory that he had lost before. "You do not need to feel like you owe me anything. Everything is determined by fate and karma. You were destined to encounter this tribulation and meant to meet me to help you avert the crisis. It's all predestined." Qin Yu opened her mouth to say. Shi Zhanchen twitched a corner of his mouth. Maybe. She did not know whether she was imagining things, but she just could not help feeling that Shi Zhanchen's words were hiding a deeper meaning behind them, as they seemed to be filled with a twinge of helplessness. Just as the two of them fell silent, the door next door was suddenly opened. Lu Junyao came walking out from inside, and when he saw Shi Zhanchen, he did not show the slightest ripple of emotion on his face, like he was completely unsurprised as he turned to glance at Qin Yu. "Come over to take your medicine." The expression on Qin Yu, who still had a smile hanging from the corners of her lips, suddenly froze. "Haven't I already recovered? Before the wound heals fully, you have to take your medicine every day. Hurry up and come." Lu Junyao then just turned around and immediately went into his room upon finishing that statement. Qin Yu's face was highly aggrieved, and the young lady who had always placed great emphasis on manners and etiquette did not even offer a parting word to the man still standing before her as she shuffled her way into the room next door, begrudgingly read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Shi Zhanchen's eyes unconsciously narrowed, and his hands under his sleeves clenched up tightly into fists. In the room next door, Qin Yu, who had been prepared to die a martyr, to bravely face her doom, did not come to see any trace of the horrifying medicinal brew in there. She sniffed her nose to check and did not detect any scent of herbs or medicine around. She was immediately puzzled as she asked, "Didn't you say I need to take my medicine?" "I lied." The man's tall figure was seated by the low table, his well-defined and beautiful-looking fingers lifting up the teapot to pour out a cup of tea. A cloud of steam rose lazily, fogging up the man's handsomely exquisite countenance, which seemed to reduce the devilishness by a notch, and added a tinge of warm tenderness instead. Chapter 205. 4. First disagreeable word and teasing starts. He had just said those words when Qin Yu was stunned into a daze for a while. It was only when she came back to her senses that she asked him, "You lied? What is she not able to understand what he is saying?" Lu Junyao took a light sip of his tea before he came to say slowly, "With that Shi Zhanchen, you must remember to keep your distance from him. Even if he comes to ingratiate himself with you, do not foolishly just believe everything he says." Qin Yu was a little surprised. Never has she thought that he would be talking about that. She could not hope but to go sit down across from him and ask, are you saying that because you know something? Lu Junyao just smiled and did not say anything, as he calmly finished his cup of tea. Qin Yu was still patiently waiting for him to say something more, but even after a long while, he did not say anything to explain further. Qin Yu was immediately feeling a little exasperated. What do you mean by cutting yourself off halfway like that? Some things wouldn't be so meaningful anymore if it is spelt out too clearly. It is better to let you find out for yourself, which would give a better sense of achievement. Lu Junyao went on to reply. I do not want to find out for myself. Can't you just tell me? Qin Yu raised an eyebrow to look at her, a little displeased. You want me to spell it out for you? Lu Junyao curved up the ends of his lips, looking at her with a faint and almost imperceptible smile. As they were alone, the color of his eyes was not altered with illusory techniques, and the violet orbs were like precious stones filled with endless stars, intoxicating just looking at them. Although that was already such a familiar sight, already used to seeing the uniquely handsome face of the man exceptionally favored by the gods, Qin Yu's heart still could not help but be drawn towards him a moment. A twitch then formed at the corner of her mouth and she was speechless with herself for a moment. Why are you looking at me like that? Are you trying to seduce an innocent young maiden to commit a crime or what? Unfortunately for you, my willpower is strong enough, so I will not waver and fall for your bewitching spell. Is that so? Lu Junyao was tickled into laughter by the stoic and serious demeanor on her face, and he then stuck his face in closer towards her, his warm breath brushing over her cheek, which felt a little ticklish. Subconsciously, she tried to lean her head away from him, trying to put some distance between them, but she then heard his low magnetic voice say, "Little fox, you're just an innocent young maiden." If one listened closely, one would detect a tinge of mirth in his voice, like he was making fun of her. Qin Yu was immediately a little infuriated and she turned her head back fiercely. In what way am I not? Time stopped in that instant. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The unfinished words suddenly halted just like that, disappearing when she touched something warm. Lu Junyao's irises contracted, where it was clear he had not expected that she would turn around so suddenly as well, to have her soft luscious lips stick right smack onto his. Except for the time when he fed her medicine while she was unconscious, the two of them had never had such an intimate moment, especially while she was conscious. This was completely unprecedented, their very first time. There was a faint fragrance on the young lady's body, not the scent of rouge or cosmetics, but a most natural kind of fragrance, mixed with a unique and refreshingly subtle smell of herbs. All that mixed together, not only was the smell not unpleasant, it instead made a person can't help but want to get closer to her. Chapter 206. 1. Don't say anything, kiss me. The young lady's flawlessly exquisite face was so close to him, enabling him to see it even more clearly just how smooth and fair her complexion really was, soft and tender like a freshly peeled egg, alluring and radiant. It was initially just an accidental bump into each other, but the two of them just froze in place, their eyes wide as they stared, so stunned that they were not able to react at all for a very long while. The man's devilishly mesmerizing violet irises deepened. Has the little one lost her mind? She's just remaining there still stuck to him and not moving away. So. Is she playing with fire and trying to seduce him? Initially, as they got more familiar and closer to each other, something in his heart was already subtly changing. In the beginning he had just found her to be interesting, and seeing how talented she was, he had made exceptions for her repeatedly, appearing by her side to help her resolve the difficulties she encountered many times. Protecting her, not allowing anyone to inflict any harm onto her, because he came to discover that it stung his eyes badly whenever he saw the lass hurt. Hence, clearly knowing that his own body's constitution was unique, where he cannot afford to carelessly not get injured, he still went ahead to help the young lady get rid of the pain on her behalf, even though he would feel like he had been severely beaten up by someone, suffering pain that was almost worse than death after he gets injured, that would take a very long time for him to recover from. But to be able to see the lass alive and well again, how did all that matter? Only the heavens knew how fearful he was of seeing her lie on the bed without moving an inch, looking so lifeless. Whenever she had fallen unconscious into a coma, her body would break out in cold sweat, her breath become weak and frail, like she might just die at any moment. Hence at those moments, he would stay to keep a tight watch over her, not daring to step away, fearing that she might just not wake up from her sleep. Bai Ji Yen was always teasing him, whether he harbored insidious designs towards the young lady, and when did he start to develop such thoughts towards the lass. Alas, the human heart was so inexplicably complicated. Who could really accurately say how the heart worked? But the thing he could be certain of was that this young lady before him was someone very different. He had lived for over 200 years and had seen people in all kinds of shapes and sizes. No one had been able to draw his eye at all, and no one had ever made him feel this way. Like, someone he would like to have by his side forever. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU in that moment, as if unfathomable cosmic forces were at work, just as the young lady snapped back to her senses and wanted to move away from the man, he suddenly stretched a hand out and clasped her tightly in an embrace, and the lips that had parted just barely a mere moment ago were strongly pressed together once more. At such close proximity, it could be seen in the young lady's beautiful phoenix-like eyes, a sudden widening of her irises from shock and astoundment, together with helpless fluster. "Tisk, little one, you delivered yourself up to the door and you're thinking of running away now? Don't even think about it." Qin Yu was only able to stare with her eyes widened, her mind a complete blank. The slight sensation of pain was felt on her lips as the man's lips recklessly gnawed invasively, tyrannical and not to be refused. Chapter 206. 2. Don't say anything, kiss me, what is this fella doing? If she isn't understanding this wrongly, he's kissing her. But when did their relationship come to be on such familiar terms till they could do something so intimate? It was not until the man wantonly invaded onto her lips that Qin Yu then came to regain her senses. Her eyes misted over slightly, looking indescribably enchanting. Seeing the young lady's slightly dazed expression, Lu Junyao then laughed softly, the thumping under her chest exhilarating to feel, the young lady indolent and mesmerizing to see. He suddenly lowered his head to peck lightly at the lips that had turned lusciously rosy from the earlier kiss, his voice edged with a slight raspiness as he said, "If you want to kiss me next time, you do not have to be so sneaky about it. I will not resist and am willing to let you have your way with me." Qin Yu was absolutely speechless. When had she wanted to do this to him? And she had been sneaky? Can this man be any more shameless? He had clearly shamelessly taken liberties with her, and he could actually still utter such nonsense now. The saying of old had really been right. Shameless people are invincible. Qin Yu gave him a mirthless smile as she broke free from under his arms and then said in a highly rational tone, "I will take it that you forgot to take your medicine today and lost your mind, and will not hold it against you as I still have need of your help after all. But the next time you go mad and want to bite someone again, remember to tell me. You will be fine with a few pricks of the needle from me. And you do not have to worry about that, as seeing that we're friends, I will not charge you a single cent." Lu Junyao was a little taken aback. He had thought that the young lady would react like she did before, either to explode right on the spot, or become indignant from humiliation and look like she was going to kill him with a ferocious gaze, or to keep her anger inside and give him the cold shoulder for several days. Never had he thought that she could still be so calm. But, those words still showed that her anger was not slight at all. Lu Junyao lowered his eyes and laughed softly. "Since you have need of my help, there has to be some form of remuneration. But with the kind of relationship we have between us, things like money and material things are too cheap to mention, so." Qin Yu arched up an eyebrow. "So what?" Just seeing the expression on that fella's face, and she knew that nothing nice was going to come out of that mouth. And just what kind of a relationship did they have? He made it sound so unclear and intimate. Is he asking for a beating? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, MM. The next time I go mad and want to bite people, you do not have to waste the effort with your needles. Might as well just sacrifice yourself. Lu Junyao said as he blinked his eyes, his demeanor deadpan earnest. Qin Yu could not find the words to say right at that moment. What does that mean? Sacrifice herself? She just could not make herself react in that instant, but then suddenly linked his words to what she had just said and recalled the shameless deed he had just committed before she almost wanted to burst out laughing from exasperation. Lu Junyao. She suddenly called out his name in a tender soothing voice, her lips curling up at the corners. Chapter 206. 3. Don't say anything, kiss me. She had been cold and detached just a moment ago and had suddenly turned to become so warm and gentle. Lu Junyao arched up an eyebrow in surprise, not knowing what kind of a scheme the young lady was hatching in her mind. He then saw a smile slowly bloom like a flower upon those lips. The person who could not wait to get away from him was at that moment actually leaning in close to him, her phoenix-like eyes seductive and her voice titillating, her beautiful face strumming the chords in his heart with that smile, every movement she made so enticing. Truly a demoness born to seduce people. Her lips parted slightly and she asked slowly in a captivating voice, "Have you fallen for me?" The expression on Lu Junyao's face became hesitant, never expecting that she would ask that, which caught him completely off guard. He narrowed his eyes and did not answer her directly, but merely laughed softly as he pulled the distance between the two of them even closer, their foreheads almost going to touch. What do you think? The mysterious vortex swirling within those violet orbs could almost suck a person's soul right into them. In the end, Qin Yu was unable to stand up against the devil who had lived for more than 200 years. As he spoke, his thin lips seemed like they were almost going to kiss her as he slowly leaned in closer and closer. It seems he was making it a habit of taking liberties with her. Qin Yu drew in a deep breath and pushed back against the man's chest with one hand, putting some distance between themselves, her head turning away to one side as she tried to calm down the emotion surging up inside from the man's sudden kiss. Lu Junyao rested his chin on the palm of one hand as he tilted his head to stare fixedly at her, a happy smile hanging from his lips. Had he been too rough just now and had given the little one too big a fright? Things like this must be taken slowly, or it would be disastrous if he cause her to dislike him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The sky was turning dark and it was almost time to go to the fleeting cloud fortress. Shi Zhanchen went to look for that prodigious young lady from the faint mist sect. Hearing the report from a subordinate, Ji Yanlong laughed, feeling rather amused. He was never prone to showing such feelings, never interested in worldly affairs. Except when he's out on a mission, he would always remain in that bamboo house and would not take a single step outside. So what could be the reason for him to take such actions this time? I heard that the young lady possesses a flawless countenance, a true rare beauty and also a prodigious all-element wielder, so she is naturally extraordinary. Maybe it is because she is so different from others that made him pay her so much attention. The subordinate behind him then ventured a guess on his own. Ji Yanlong's face smiled meaningfully and he then shook his head lightly. Shi Zhanchen is a very strange man. From the day that I brought him back here, he had then decided on his own to establish the Assassin's Temple. I had only indulged him because what he did was beneficial to the Carefree Valley as it would expand the Carefree Valley's might. Despite the fact that he holds such great powers, he had never cared for vain titles and fame, always keeping a very low profile within the Carefree Valley, never seeming like he was plotting anything. I have never been able to fathom just what is it that he really seeks. Chapter 206. 4. Don't say anything, kiss me. What is Shi Zhanchen thinking? Not mentioning whether he is scheming something by getting close to the young lady for the moment, what your subordinate does not understand is something else. The subordinate contemplated for a moment before he suddenly opened his mouth to say, Shi Zhanchen had never failed any mission he went on, regardless whether it was to assassinate someone or to retrieve an item. But with the sacred Buddha palm lotus this time, he actually slipped up. Doesn't the valley chief think that something feels strange? Ji Yen Long raised an eyebrow to look at the man. What are your thoughts about that? Your subordinate thinks that it's impossible that he failed. Something must have happened during the mission. That is indeed unusual. Ji Yen Long nodded as he rubbed his chin, a deeply thoughtful look coming to show on that amiable and harmless-looking face. It looks like something interesting must have happened on his last trip out. Night descended and the people from the 3 great sects participating in this year's friendship meet had all gathered together. Besides the participating disciples, people who wanted to spectate were also allowed to follow them up. But the fleeing cloud fortress was not a place that was easy to go up to. One would need to climb over 10,000 steps and no spirit powers could be employed or they would be sent flying out by the barrier array at the fleeting cloud fortress. At that height, it was really no joke. If one was already halfway up and was struck down, not to mention they would have wasted all that effort and be out from the competition, whether their corpse could still be found in one piece was another question. Hence, even though the fleeting cloud fortress was one of the most wondrous sights in the constellation lands, no one had ever been able to easily climb their way up there, as it was not only a great test of one's physical endurance, one needed to also possess extraordinary determination. If one was not able to persevere all the way right to the top but wanted to give up halfway, there was no chance for such regrets with death the only other option. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU with the fleeting cloud fortress, there was actually a beautiful legend surrounding it. It was told that the place tested how true of heart the love between two people really was, as only for people who were truly in love, would they be able to reach the top to the fleeting cloud fortress for their loved one, to make a wish within the fleeting cloud fortress that would definitely come true. For a man and a woman, the hidden hands of fate would be guiding them along, the two of them destined to end up together. Don't know whether the legend of the fleeting cloud fortress is truly real, but reaching the top is the first thing that everyone needs to do now, and all of you must definitely persevere till you reach up there, or you would come to lose your life if you give up halfway. So all of you must choose carefully. Ji Yen Long repeated as he beamed at everyone, his gaze sweeping over them. Everyone will also be welcome to verify whether the legend regarding two people in love is fact or fiction, as with such a great number of people here, maybe your destined one is among them. So on this climb up to the fleeting cloud fortress, men and women would move separately, each group entering from a different side while we quietly await for your good word. Chapter 207. 1. Come here, let me tell you a secret. Besides just taking one step after another to scale your way up to the fleeting cloud fortress, there is another secret passage that would take you all the way up to the top. But this secret passage was known only to one person, Ji Yen Long alone. He was just a regular man with no cultivated powers, and he could naturally not be able to compare with all the others who hold deep powers of cultivation. Hence, he was the only person who used the secret passage to go up there, while all the others, including the Carefree Valley's internal members, had to reach the fleeting cloud fortress based on their own strength, with no exception of favoritism. As men and women moved out separately, Qin Bei was naturally unable to follow Qin Yu. He could not help but look worriedly at her. His lips moved slightly, like he wanted to say something, but someone then hooked an arm around his shoulders from behind, and pulled him along together. He turned his head to look, and saw the man's violet eyes sparkling with an extraordinary light under the night, exceptionally beautiful to see. I'll be watching over this kid here. You just remember to be careful with everything you do. Lu Junyao curved up his lips, as he gazed tenderly at the young lady. If you come to encounter any kind of danger that you are not able to resolve, you have the communication device I gave you, don't you? Remember to call out to me. The expression on Qin Yu's face changed slightly, but she did not say anything and just nodded her head slightly. Although this fella usually acted a little odd and was even often thuggish at times, he had never held back when it came to helping her. In regards to that point, Qin Yu was really rather grateful to him. Just when she was about to go in through the entrance, the man suddenly called out to her. Qin Yu turned herself around slightly, and looked at him in bewilderment. Lu Junyao laughed, the sound becoming exceptionally magnetic and melodious under the night. He then asked her in a soft voice, about the Fleeting Cloud Fortress legend. Do you believe it? Qin Yu blinked her eyes, rather surprised that he would show interest in that, but she still replied truthfully. With things like that, it's true if one believes in it and false if one doesn't, isn't it? The smile at the corners of the man's lips deepened. I feel that it's rather interesting though. After we reach the top, I have something to tell you. What is it that you cannot tell me now? Qin Yu raised an eyebrow and asked. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I can't now. The man's face showed a mysterious smile and he ignored the young lady after that, grabbing at Qin Bei to go into the entrance on the other side. Qin Yu could not help but feel a little frustrated. What does that fellow want to tell her? That thought was still lingering in her mind and a gust of wind blew past her. She turned around and saw a slim seductive-looking figure passing beside her, white robes billowing, carrying an air of noble aloofness that made people not dare to get too close. Yan Ning Luo. Qin Yu arched up an eyebrow, but did not notice anything strange. Mu Lai and Ming Yi came walking over from the side right after that, each of them holding one side of her, and Qin Yu did not pay any more attention to it. Chapter 207. 2. Come here, let me tell you a secret at the Fleeting Cloud Fortress. Only when one was standing at the highest point would they be able to see the unbelievable view below. At that moment, Ji Yanlong and the 4 demon ghosts who were never far from his side had reached the top through the secret passage. He gazed down from that high point and said with a soft laugh, Wonder how many people will fall off from the Fleeting Cloud Fortress this time and have their bodies smashed to smithereens. From ancient times, people who are able to climb their way up here with their own strength have been few and far between. One of the 4 demon ghosts responded in a raspy voice, It wouldn't mean much for them even if those people managed to make their way up here, as only one as capable as the Valley Chief with unsurpassing intelligence can be the Fleeting Cloud Fortress' final host. A deep and meaningful smile then curled up at the ends of Ji Yanlong's lips as he murmured softly, That's right. The Fleeting Cloud Fortress is not a place that anyone can come up to so easily. But since they have chosen to deliver themselves to their deaths, what can I do? The people who were coming up were not just the disciples participating in the friendship meet competition, but it included many respected and highly revered personnel who held high positions in the other 2 great sections. Moreover, even the ones holding the highest authority in the Faint Mist sect and the Limitless sect would be coming to spectate at the matches. Haha. He had all the time in the world to wait for them to come up here, but just how many of them would be able to make their way up here alive was not known yet. He had already been very merciful to have given them a warning. Everything at the Fleeting Cloud Fortress was clearly presented to everyone before their eyes that night. The path under their feet was rather uneven and bumpy. They were not surrounded in pitch-black darkness, but the place was speckled with soft glowing fairy lights like stars all around, some green some blue, a breathtaking sight that lent a sense of enchantment under the beautiful night sky. What is that? It's really pretty. Xian Yun, who had been by Ming Yi's side, was drawn by the sight, and could not help but open her mouth to comment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU girls just love to look at beautiful looking things, and when they see it, they just cannot help but to reach a hand out to touch them. Xian Yun knew very well that beautiful things were usually dangerous, but she still went ahead to stretch her hand out like she was bewitched. The expression on her face was highly wary as she reached out, but before she could even touch the glowing light, a palm suddenly smacked her hand away. Xian Yun felt as if she had just woken up from a dream, staring in bewilderment at the reddened back of her hand. She then turned her head to look at the young girl beside her. What did you hit me for? If I did not smack you back to your senses, you would already be dead. Ming Yi creased up her brows and continued to say, Look carefully again to see what those things are. And you really dared to stretch your hand out to go touch them. Hearing that, Qian Yun then summoned up a ball of pale green flames in her palm. This was soul fire that people of the soul cultivators tribe were born with, linked with the fact that they possessed such powerful soul powers. Chapter 207. 3. Come here, let me tell you a secret. After that young lady's strange and sudden death, it made the bunch of girls quit being so careless and indifferent, but to become alert and wary, fearful for their lives. On the stretch of their journey that came after that, besides being able to still see the countless number of blood-sucking glowing bugs, they did not encounter anything else that was all that strange. But that temporary spell of tranquility did not cause Qin Yu to let down her guard in the slightest. For they had merely covered less than 10% of the tens of thousand steps of stairs, and who knew what kind of other dangers lay hidden behind them. On the other side, things were not so good for the men. Almost a good half of them were showing wounds and bruises on their bodies, dismayed faces covered in dust, looking highly wretched. But a certain someone stood out as the lone exception. Not only was his body clean and unspoiled as before, he looked every bit as suave as he did when they had just come in, without a single hair out of place, causing many people to be unable to help themselves but grit their teeth to see. Only the heavens knew what kind of an assault they had come under earlier. The ground beneath their feet suddenly started to shake, and countless rock golems suddenly broke out from underground, striking them before they could even react. There was limited space on those steps and they were not able to execute much of their moves. Moreover, Ji Yanlong had already said that no spirit powers were to be used, or they would be thrown right off by the barrier array on top at the fleeting cloud fortress, their bodies impossible to find. So there was nothing they could do but only to defend themselves, and it could well be imagined just how exasperating it was for them. There were ferocious beasts and human-shaped golems transformed out of rock, all of them extremely strong and powerful, and they were relentless with their pursuit, impossible to shake off like they had no weaknesses at all. Su Liemo, Shi Zhanchen and the others were able to handle things themselves easily, but the others were not so fortunate, where even Xianyuan Che, who was the 7th-ranked inner circle disciple, was a little disheveled and covered in a bit of dust. But there was still one single person who stood as the lone exception. Maybe other people had not noticed it, but Qin Bei was able to see it clearly. Lu Junyao. The deep and mysteriously unfathomable man had not even moved a finger all the way from the very beginning. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. None of those golems even came close to the man. Maybe it was because of fear, but wherever he was as he made his way forward, all those monsters would clear a path for the man without needing any urging, surging around to attack the people behind him. Qin Bei was most fortunate. Not even a single hair on him was hurt, with the man protecting him the entire way. He looked at the bunch of men with swollen noses and bruised faces behind him, their clothes tattered and torn, and he could not help but felt his mouth twitch, suddenly feeling that he had latched himself onto the great thigh of a godly entity, his entire path completely clear of obstacles. Without needing to turn his head back to look, he was able to feel the eyes filled with such strong jealousy and envious hatred they were almost boring holes into his back. Why are all these creatures not attacking you? After having hesitated for like half the day, Qin Bei finally could no longer hold back but to ask the question that had been nagging him. Chapter 207. 3. Come here, let me tell you a secret. The burning flames lit up the slightly sinister feeling air surrounding them, and closely at the glowing lights, more closely, Qian Yun's face turned pale from fright, almost letting out a squeal. The sudden light from the flames seemed to alarm the glowing lights, as they let out an ear-piercing sharp screech. All those tiny little green and blue glowing lights, in what way were they just a natural pretty-looking phenomenon? It was a bunch of blood-sucking bugs whose wings were bigger than their bodies, and the light was emanating from their eyes. These creatures were highly timid, and as long as one did not go agitate them, they basically would not pose to be of any danger. But they were however a maniacal bunch where if you were to even accidentally touch one of them, they would think that they were under attack, and would counter-attack mercilessly. Thinking about it, with the fleeting cloud fortress so high up, 10,000 steps of stairs up, filled fully with so many of those terrifying blood-sucking bugs, just the thought of it will send chills up one's spine. Setting that the girl was really quite shocked, Ming Yi sighed and stretched a hand out to pat the girl comfortingly on her back. "That'll teach you not to be so careless again. How could you make such a mistake? You should know better than to go touch something so dangerous like that." Qian Yun's body was still in shock, frozen in place. Her face was pale as she stammered, I don't know why. I was just unconsciously reaching my hand out wanting to touch. You cannot blame it all on her. Qin Yu chirped in when she saw what was happening. Those bugs have some rather unusual eyes, and staring at them for too long would indeed mesmerize a person, causing them to do things that they are not aware of themselves. She had not even finished her words when a maniacal voice suddenly reached them, and many people were frantically trying to persuade her to stop. Ha ha ha. I'm the strongest in the world. I'm the most powerful. Look. I can fly. I'm flying, ha. Once she finished saying that, a petite little figure was seen suddenly leaping right off from the fleeting cloud fortress. Before anyone could even react, there was already no sign of her to be seen. Little Junior, read latest chapters at Wuxia World. A number of people beside the spot she was standing at hung their heads and cried. That entire scene had happened too fast, and there was no way any one of them was able to prevent that tragedy from happening. Although they had not been moving all that fast, but they had still come up a few hundred steps. That height, to a girl who had already lost her mind and was completely defenseless, meant only certain death from the plummet. How? Qian Yun's eyes were wide, her voice quivering quite a bit. Qin Yu shook her head with a regretful sigh and then looked at the young girl and said, "Lucky for you, you had not looked at them for too long and was still able to smack you back to your senses. Otherwise, I fear that your body might already have been sucked dry of blood by now. Let's all be more careful from here on and try to stick together. Do not stray too far away from the group so that we'll be able to help each other in time in case of any danger." Mu Lai said with a grave face, her voice tinged with a chill. Chapter 207. 4. Come here, let me tell you a secret. After that young lady's strange and sudden death, it made the bunch of girls quit being so careless and indifferent, but to become alert and wary, fearful for their lives. On the stretch of their journey that came after that, besides being able to still see the countless number of blood-sucking glowing bugs, they did not encounter anything else that was all that strange. But that temporary spell of tranquility did not cause Qin Yu to let down her guard in the slightest. For they had merely covered less than 10% of the tens of thousand steps of stairs, and who knew what kind of other dangers lay hidden behind them. On the other side, things were not so good for the men. Almost a good half of them were showing wounds and bruises on their bodies, dismayed faces covered in dust, looking highly wretched. But a certain someone stood out as the lone exception. Not only was his body clean and unspoiled as before, he looked every bit as suave as he did when they had just come in, without a single hair out of place, causing many people to be unable to help themselves but grit their teeth to see. Only the heavens knew what kind of an assault they had come under earlier. The ground beneath their feet suddenly started to shake, and countless rock golems suddenly broke out from underground, striking them before they could even react. There was limited space on those steps and they were not able to execute much of their moves. Moreover, Ji Yanlong had already said that no spirit powers were to be used, or they would be thrown right off by the barrier array on top at the fleeting cloud fortress, their bodies impossible to find. So there was nothing they could do but only to defend themselves, and it could well be imagined just how exasperating it was for them. There were ferocious beasts and human-shaped golems transformed out of rock, all of them extremely strong and powerful, and they were relentless with their pursuit, impossible to shake off like they had no weaknesses at all. Su Liemo, Shi Chen and the others were able to handle things themselves easily, but the others were not so fortunate, where even Xianyuan Che, who was the 7th-ranked inner circle disciple, was a little disheveled and covered in a bit of dust. But there was still one single person who stood as the lone exception. Maybe other people had not noticed it, but Qin Bei was able to see it clearly. Lu Junyao. The deep and mysteriously unfathomable man had not even moved a finger all the way from the very beginning. None of those golems even came close to the man. Maybe it was because of fear, but wherever he was as he made his way forward, all those monsters would clear a path for the man without needing any urging, surging around to attack the people behind him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Qin Bei was most fortunate. Not even a single hair on him was hurt, with the man protecting him the entire way. He looked at the bunch of men with swollen noses and bruised faces behind him, their clothes tattered and torn, and he could not help but felt his mouth twitch, suddenly feeling that he had latched himself onto the great thigh of a godly entity, his entire path completely clear of obstacles. Without needing to turn his head back to look, he was able to feel the eyes filled with such strong jealousy and envious hatred they were almost boring holes into his back. Why are all these creatures not attacking you? After having hesitated for like half the day, Qin Bei finally could no longer hold back but to ask the question that had been nagging him. Chapter 208. 1. Everyone's stuck in a hopeless situation. The youth's exceptionally good-looking face was at least 60 to 70% alike to Qin Yu's, and he was at that moment gazing highly curiously at the man beside him. Even the youth himself had not come to notice that in those good-looking eyes of his, they were tinged with an almost imperceptible sparkle of worship. Lu Junyao curved up the corners of his lips and glanced at the youth to say, "Those golems have developed their spirit consciousness, so they would naturally not do something stupid like striking an egg against a rock. They know innately just how great the disparity in power really is, where even if all of them were to attack at the same time in a single surge, they will only end up being smashed up into dust." Qin Bei raised an eyebrow and looked at the man doubtfully as he asked, "Are these monsters really able to sense that you're someone not to be trifled with more than everyone else, and that is why they're keeping themselves far away from you? But besides being a little more good-looking than most men, this man does not look to be all that much different from others, doesn't he?" Hearing that, Lu Junyao merely smiled quietly at the youth as he stretched a hand out to ruffle the youth's hair. "Wait till the day you become truly powerful and you'll then understand what I mean." Caught off guard and finding his head being ruffled up, Qin Bei jumped back a couple of steps in shock as he stared incredulously at the man and said, This habit of ruffling up people's head. Did you pick that up from Qin Yu? It isn't enough that his head was always being rubbed like a little puppy by Qin Yu, and now he has met a man who likes to ruffle his head as well. And the man holds such unfathomable powers that there was no way he would be able to stand against him, so he had no choice but to quietly let his head be rubbed. Thinking of that, he felt that his life seemed so dark. Is his future one that he will forever be suppressed by these two people? Is he not allowed to have some dignity? The changes over the expressions on the youth's face were really fascinating to watch, altering so many times before turning into one of utter despair. Lu Junyao curved up his lips, feeling rather amused. "What? The lass likes to touch your head as well?" He had asked the lass why she would always throw such a fit whenever he touched her head. So it's because she was so used to touching the lad's head and was just not used to it happening to her instead. Upon hearing the man say, "as well," the expression on Qin Bei's face was a little astounded as he asked, "Don't tell me that Qin Yu ruffled your head before?" Lu Junyao scoffed upon hearing that. She wouldn't dare. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Qin Bei then heaved a sigh of relief. He had though. "Keep close to me and stop daydreaming." The man called from in front, and Qin Bei quickly snapped back to his senses, taking a few quick steps to go catch up. Su Liemo had already been rather curious about this mysterious purple-robed man, and having just witnessed the man's terrifying powers intimidate the enemies right before his own eyes, deterring them from attacking the man at all, that was not something that just any skilled pugilist was able to do. He was not about to believe that this man was simply just a mere 7-star grade teacher. And, he seemed to have appeared together with that last Chinyu. The relationship between those two appeared to be rather close. Chapter 208. 2. Everyone's stuck in a hopeless situation, but, that last was someone that the chief was fond of, and he would have to pay close attention to this man. On the other side, Ji Yanlong was seated inside the majestic palace at the highest point of the fleeting cloud fortress. There was a very big mirror inside the palace, and through that mirror, he was able to see everything happening below inside the fortress, everything within his grasp of control. Ji Yanlong was observing everyone through the mirror when the mirror suddenly turned a pitch black. A black mist then rose up and a voice filled with sinister mirth was heard. Ji Yanlong, the master has ordered for you to activate all of the fleeting cloud fortress traps and arrays. Not a single person who has come here in the fleeting cloud fortress today can live but just the young lady named Chinyu. Hearing that voice, Ji Yanlong, who had been sitting proud and straight up in that kingly throne, was suddenly taken aback a moment, before he suddenly asked in confusion, "Why has the master given such an order? Isn't it said that he will not interfere with my affairs? Moreover, there are many noble and important people with highly prominent backgrounds here in the fleeting cloud fortress today, so if something unfortunate happens to them while participating in the Carefree Valley's friendship meet, how am I going to be able to answer for it to their people?" The voice was still filled with evil malice. These people have indeed not committed any wrong, but they can only blame it on the one single person who should not have set foot into this place is now here. The master's objective is just that one person, but nothing among all the ordinary and mundane things here in the fleeting cloud fortress can do anything to him, and only the trap the master has devised himself would be able to take down this person. Really? Ji Yanlong was a little surprised. Makes me wonder who could this person be. The face in the mirror clouded by black mist suddenly transformed, and the figure of a man appeared. Ji Yanlong found the figure to be unfamiliar, having no impression of having seen that person before. Has this person offended the master? You do not need to know that. This person is not from the constellation lands but a highly skilled pugilist from a higher-leveled realm. He holds extraordinary power, and that is why ordinary methods would not be able to stop him. Remember to activate all the traps and arrays, and the master does not want this person to walk out from here the fortress alive. As for all the other people, you just do as you deem fit. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hearing those words, Ji Yanlong's face turned pale from shock. My lord, the constellation lands is controlled by a set of laws. If I am to murder a person from a higher realm, I fear that I will suffer persecution. How could I possibly dare? With the master around, what do you have to fear? Very soon, the entire world will belong to the master, so how much could just killing one person from a higher realm matter? You're always being so timid and afraid of trouble. The sinister-sounding voice said with sarcastic contempt, his words filled with blind worship for his so-called master. Bolstered with that guarantee, Ji Yanlong's worry in his heart then dissipated a little. That face, who always carried an easy light smile, looked a little grave at that moment. Deliberating on it for a while, Ji Yanlong finally opened his mouth to say, "In that case, then I shall follow the master's orders. But if I come to suffer any persecution from this, I shall expect the master to extend a helping hand." Chapter 208. 3. Everyone's stuck in a hopeless situation, that will naturally be the case. As long as you serve the master loyally, the master will not treat you shabbily. The voice was arrogant and disdainful, and then continued to add, "Remember to not harm that young lady Chinyu in any way." Upon saying that, the black mist in the mirror gradually dissipated and faded away, to show the view as it did before. At that moment, The fastest among the people had already ascended to reach over 1,000 steps up the fleeting cloud fortress, and among these people, was Qin Yu herself. Ji Yanlong's face was one of incredulity as he shook his head and murmured, "Just who is this? Qin Yu?" Even that stone-hearted and emotionless Shi Zhanchen had tried to get close to this young lady, and now the master was also treating her differently. How strange. Does any one of you feel like it's getting colder the higher we go? Ming Yi's lips were a little pale. Didn't know whether it was because she was afflicted with that frost poison for so many long years, she seemed to have become extra sensitive to any fall in temperature. Although she had been cured of the frost poison and was not that afraid of the cold anymore, the sudden drop in temperature had still made her feel highly uncomfortable. "I am feeling a little cold as well." Mu Lai nodded in agreement. "Maybe not just merely a little cold." She lowered her eyes to look down at her hands, and she clenched up her long slender fingers. She actually saw a thin layer of frost break and fall in a glittering sprinkle. Winter had clearly passed and the temperature should logically not fall so low. Moreover, the climate in the carefree valley was usually warmer than the wintry faint mist sect that would be blanketed in pristine white snow. Qin Yu, who had been walking in front, suddenly halted her steps and her eyes flashed with a sharp glint. Her cold clear voice then sounded, "Show yourselves." Hearing that, Mu Lai and the others were taken aback. "What is it?" As Qin Yu's voice fell, many white-colored things fell from the night sky, and soon, a layer of silver frost had formed under their feet. It had started to snow. Strange occurrences can only mean that there's devilry afoot. The few of them immediately tensed up their bodies as they surveyed the surroundings warily. Razor-sharp ice blades suddenly came shooting malevolently straight towards them, their tips tinged with a bright spot of blue. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Yu's eyes darkened. "Look out! The tips of the ice blades are poisonous." The few of them quickly dodged away, and they saw the ice blade scratch the blood-sucking glowing bugs around them. In the very next instant, the light faded from those bugs, clearly already dead. After the few of them barely managed to dodge those icy blades, a sense of calm seemed to suddenly fall over the place, where no other strange signs were seen. The momentary peace passed very quickly and they felt a tremor under their feet, like something huge was approaching from the front, its heavy feet stomping on the ground with every step, lumbering towards them. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.